Media Molecule introduced the world to Little Big Planet, a charming and innovative platformer that promised to revolutionize user-generated content in gaming. With its adorable Sackboy mascot and the mantra, play, create, share, Little Big Planet captured the hearts and imaginations of millions, spawning sequels, spin-offs, and even a kart racing game. It seemed that Media Molecule had struck gold, creating a franchise that could stand the test of time and continue to evolve with each new installment. Yet in 2025, the once vibrant world of Little Big Planet has fallen eerily silent. The servers for the original games have shut down, and the series' presence in the gaming landscape has diminished to a mere whisper of its former glory. So what happened to this beloved franchise? How did a series that once stood as a shining example of creativity and community-driven content find itself fading into obscurity? Why did Little Big Planet die? As always, our story starts with two people, Alex Evans and Mark Healy. Alex was a programmer and Mark was an artist, and the duo worked together at a company called Bullfrog Productions, which was ran by Peter Molyneux. After producing classics like Dungeon Keeper, the studio was sold over to Electronic Arts, and Molyneux started a new studio with the key staff from Bullfrog called Lionhead Studios. Naturally, this included Alex and Mark, and from there, Lionhead went on to produce highly regarded titles such as Black and White and Fable. In his spare time, Mark Healy worked on a low-budget side project called Ragdoll Kung Fu. It was a weird little game that had a $50 budget. The gameplay consisted of using your mouse to control ragdoll fighters to beat people up while collecting power-ups. The game ended up being the very first third-party title on Steam and did pretty well for itself given the ragtag development cycle. The project gave Mark and Alex a taste of what it was like to make games with full creative control and made a bit of a name for themselves outside of working under Peter Molyneux. But leaving a financially secure job was a pretty risky leap, so they decided to wait before pursuing anything serious. Back at Lionhead, the studio's next couple titles bombed financially. Paired with its explosive growth, it was clear that the company wasn't going to last much longer if something didn't change. So Peter Molyneux decided to lay off 90 employees to sweeten the deal for a potential Microsoft acquisition. And suddenly, this changed everything. It no longer seemed like staying at Lionhead would be a safe employment option, so Alex and Mark, along with Kareem Attorney and David Smith, left Lionhead to chase their own crazy dreams and form Media Molecule. And their first project was a new, ambitious title called Little Big Planet. The earliest prototypes of Little Big Planet certainly looked interesting to say the least. The first pitch was a tech demo with a character called Yellowhead. It revolved around physics-based 2D gameplay, and even at its earliest stage, there were quite a few similarities to the gameplay of Little Big Planet that we're all familiar with, which was impressive for something cobbled together so quickly. From this demo alone, Sony were surprisingly interested, and they decided to give Media Molecule a shot. But not with blind faith. If Media Molecule wanted Sony's full backing, they would need to have something substantial to show in just 6 months. With that, the team got to work. Little Big Planet was going to be something different, something fun, quirky, creative, and overflowing with character and charm. It was going to be a platformer, but with an insane level of customization, a unique art style, and a heavy emphasis on replayable, user-generated content. It was unlike any other game on the market, and it was gonna be amazing. The robust costume creator was inspired by the one in Ragdoll Kung Fu, leading to the creation of the iconic Sackboy that the series has become known for. After just 6 months of work, Sony was happy with what they'd seen and decided to move forward with their partnership, featuring Little Big Planet at the 2007 Game Development Conference. This is where the world first became aware of Little Big Planet, and, well, people loved it. It was a dream come true for the developers. The game clearly had a market. But there was little time to celebrate with how much work they had left, since Sony wanted this game finished as soon as possible. Little Big Planet needed a story mode to showcase what was possible in the level editor, but there were a bunch of problems to tackle first. Unlike most games, which have their own developer-exclusive tools to create levels, it was crucial that the story mode was made with the same tools available to the players. This would allow the tools to be thoroughly play-tested by the developers and showcase what their game was really capable of through the gameplay of the campaign. After about a year of development, Little Big Planet was ready to launch to the public, complete with an in-depth level editor, a way to access a wide variety of user-made content, a solid campaign, and some starter levels made by a public beta in which players got early access. It seemed like the perfect game that nobody even knew they wanted. So, how was the game received? On the 27th of October, 2008, Little Big Planet was officially released. And I probably don't need to tell you, it was monstrously successful. The game sold millions of copies, was a critical darling, and won countless awards. Everyone who played it fell completely in love with it and its premise of play, create, and share. At its core, the gameplay was a 2.5D physics-based platformer where you could move between 3 layers at will and grab certain objects to either pull or swing off of. You'd start by playing through the game's charming story mode where you would collect all sorts of prize bubbles. This would unlock costumes, stickers, materials, and objects for you to use to make creations of your own. Then, you would publish whatever level you made for others to enjoy. Or you could just play what others have made instead. Either way, the game was a blast. Little Big Planet allowed players to express themselves in unprecedented ways. The game oozed with so much creativity that it was inevitable that it encouraged players to do the same. Even if you didn't want to make entire levels, it was easy to spend hours just putting together outfits with costumes and stickers. The costumes were pretty self-explanatory. You could dress up Sackboy with a bunch of different clothes and materials. But the stickers were super unique and revolutionized character and level creation. At any time, you could open your Poppet and place stickers anywhere on the screen, even on Sackboy. There were hundreds of stickers, some were 2D while others were called decorations, which were 3D models. Since you could combine these with costumes, it led to one of the most advanced character creators of any game at the time. The mechanic was also great for decorating the levels you created, letting you transform a boring cardboard wasteland into something fun and colorful. Of course, the actual level creation tools were stellar as well. You could select from dozens of materials to create whatever you wanted. Some materials were grabbable, could be blown up, and were extra heavy, and some like dark matter were indestructible and couldn't be moved. You could place them in any shape, put stickers on them, make them hazardous, or strap rockets and bombs onto them. Plus, you could choose from a bunch of music, change the background of stages, and control the lighting of a level. The possibilities were really endless. Not only did the game have all of these features, but Media Molecule also worked with Sony to create a website for the game. It allowed players to log in with their PlayStation account to easily browse for levels on their computer and queue them up to be played in the game later. The website was called lbp.me, and it helped the community flourish. And less than a year after launch, players uploaded over 1 million levels and amassed over 240 million plays through this site. It was extremely important to the community, so keep that in mind as we come around to it a bit later. Now, as you've probably noticed, I'm on camera, something that I don't typically do. My goal on this channel is to make this content into the best video game retrospectives out there, so if you enjoy the new style or have any feedback, please let me know in the comments. Also, I just launched a new Discord server for the community, and we plan on doing community game nights, gaming tournaments, movie nights, and so much more. So if you're interested, consider joining using the link in the description. Anyways, like I said, the game had 240 million plays on its user-generated levels in less than a year. Players loved Little Big Planet, so it shouldn't come as a surprise that the game received multiple 10 out of 10 review scores and Game of the Year awards, including more than 80 industry awards, which is wild to say the least. And it sold well, with over 1.3 million copies sold by January of 2009. Basically overnight, Media Molecule had gone from a small, scrappy indie developer to one of the most innovative and prestigious names in the gaming industry. And they weren't about to stop anytime soon, because Little Big Planet wasn't done after launch. There were tons of DLCs to follow, and updates to fix bugs and add other features. This ranged from costume packs to sticker packs, music packs, and even mini campaigns that contained all of the above with unique items and mechanics. Examples include the Metal Gear Solid pack and the Pirates of the Caribbean pack, both of which were adored by fans. Then, helping to cement the game's success even further, a Game of the Year edition was released on September 8th, 2009, which came with a bunch of DLC and a selection of curated community levels, complete with creator interviews. Now, I will say, much of the DLC's development was outsourced to other studios, including Tarsier Studios, Supermassive Games, and Fireproof Games. It may seem like a weird way to manage the content for your wildly successful game, but the team at Media Molecule needed the manpower for something even bigger and better: Little Big Planet 2. Turns out, a sequel was pretty much in the works as soon as the first game was out the door, but there was a big obstacle that would need to be addressed by Media Molecule before a new sequel could even be teased to the public. The game needed full backwards compatibility with everything made in the first game, because otherwise, the sequel would fragment the community. So, when the sequel was formally announced on May 10th, 2010, this was, of course, among the list of many new features. The announcement led to a webpage chock full of teasers, screenshots, and of course, a trailer. This time around, there was an even bigger emphasis on user-generated content. Little Big Planet 2 wasn't just a platform game anymore, it was going to be a platform for a game. The new features included microchips to program objects, AI characters you could dress up and program with unique behaviors, ways to make vehicles, new game modes, and a bunch of power-ups. Whereas before, in the original game, you were mostly restricted to creating platformers, it was now possible to create a wide variety of different genres. Top-down perspectives, RPGs, arcade shoot-em-ups, fighting games, first-person shooters, and actual feature-length movies were all possible. If you could think of it, it could become a level. Little Big Planet 2 was the shining example of how to do a sequel right, and it instantly made the first game seem like it was unfinished by comparison. Little Big Planet 2 launched on January 18th, 2011, and it was met with universal acclaim from critics and players alike. The game received widespread praise for these expanded creation tools, improved gameplay mechanics, and charming presentation. And just like its predecessor, Little Big Planet 2's critical reception was overwhelmingly positive, with a 91 on Metacritic. The story mode was also well received, with many praising its quirky characters and engaging narrative that served as an excellent showcase for the game's expanded creation tools. In terms of commercial performance, Little Big Planet 2 achieved significant success. The game debuted at number 1 on the UK All Formats chart in its first week of release, demonstrating strong initial sales. In North America, it was the 4th best-selling game in January of 2011, selling over 353,000 units in its first couple of weeks on the market. It seemed like Media Molecule had built a franchise that could last to eternity, but behind the scenes, the sentiment was looking a bit different. See, Media Molecule achieved massive success with Little Big Planet and Little Big Planet 2, but they weren't looking to sit around and milk the franchise to death like many large game developers do. They wanted to move on to other projects. So after a successful partnership with Sumo Digital on a DLC called the Cross Controller Pack, Media Molecule decided to take a step back and let Sumo take charge on the next installment of the Little Big Planet franchise. While this seems like a strange decision, there was no studio better equipped to handle the development of the next game than Sumo Digital, as the company was full of active Little Big Planet community members who knew what the next game needed to be. So, work began on Little Big Planet 3, led by this new team, with Media Molecule on the sidelines, the same year that Little Big Planet 2 launched in 2011. Of all the development cycles in the franchise, Little Big Planet 3 had the messiest. A huge amount of content had to be cut from the game, including entire areas, themes, and characters which either didn't fit or needed extensive reworking. And that wasn't even the worst of it, because there was another issue that made this game's development process messy from the very start. Originally, Little Big Planet 3 was just going to be for the PlayStation 3, but Sony was working on the PlayStation 4, and they wanted one of their flagship franchises to have a sequel on their new console ASAP. So not only was Sumo Digital working on a franchise that they had no experience with, they now had to create and support 2 versions of the same game with a strict deadline. Even worse, one of these versions was for a console that nobody had experience developing for. It was a terrible position to be in, but they had to make the best of things. So, Little Big Planet 3 released on November 18th, 2014 for both the PS3 and PS4. It brought along with it many new tools to work with. Everything from the past 2 games could be ported over if you've played them, DLC included. There were 3 new characters apart from Sackboy who had unique costumes and abilities, with Sackboy receiving new abilities in turn as well. The layer limit was expanded to 16, allowing players to make huge new levels with an insane amount of depth and a bunch of other improvements. Not only was the game brimming with creative innovations, it enabled the community to make their own, and Little Big Planet 3 should have been the best game yet. The issue, however, was that it didn't work. Among any number of features just not working as intended, there were numerous crashes and entire save files getting corrupted. This forced people to restart the entire story mode and, much worse, lose every level, costume, and object they ever created. For a game of this nature, that's about the worst thing imaginable. The issue was so widespread that people began speedrunning how quickly they could corrupt their profiles. And this was just the tip of the iceberg. The story mode was incredibly short and barely featured any of the 3 new characters, and online, the heart and soul of the series for many frequently disconnected. Additionally, there was no crossplay between PS3 and PS4 players. This split the community, which was already smaller than ever due to the extremely buggy launch that drove many away. They either hopped back onto Little Big Planet 3 or moved on to something else entirely. Many of the worst bugs did get fixed over time, but it took longer than it should have, and the damage was already done. Compared to before, the community was basically dead. The game did receive DLC after launch, but it was some of the most underwhelming in the series. With slow development, underwhelming DLCs, and a general fizzling out of the passion surrounding Little Big Planet 3 was by far the most hated game in the series. And with online multiplayer never quite being fixed, the community continued to be non-existent throughout the life of this game. Updates stopped on May 18th, 2017, and Little Big Planet 3's support officially ended. But looking at the numbers, the sales of Little Big Planet 3 were still pretty impressive. Today, estimates claim that the first title has sold over 4.5 million copies, the second title 3.4 million copies, and the third title 5.5 million copies. While sales figures were obviously quite solid, the general sentiment and excitement surrounding the series had been on the decline for a while, and without Media Molecule's involvement, it was unclear what would happen to Little Big Planet. I mean, how much more could they really do to innovate a game franchise that has already done so much? Was there even a way to innovate and build upon the create and share ethos that LBP had been focused on from the beginning? Well, not really. So, after 6 years of silence, a spin-off was born. On June 11th, 2020, fans received word of a new entry into the Little Big Planet franchise called Sackboy: A Big Adventure. It was a 3D platformer spin-off developed by Sumo Digital and set to release on the PlayStation 5. It came out on November 12th, 2020, and was a pretty decent game. It managed to sell about 1.3 million copies in all. But unlike the other entries in the series, there was no way to create any kind of user-generated content. It was a big shift from the formula in the previous games, and it caused a lot of longtime fans to ignore this new title and go back to the classics. Even if it was smaller than ever in 2020, there were still thousands of players on each mainline title and millions of levels to choose from. But just 12 days after Sackboy: A Big Adventure came out, those longtime fans encountered an issue. LBP.me, that website that I mentioned earlier, had gone offline due to attacks from hackers. This wasn't a catastrophic event on its own, as you could still play the levels just fine, and the website was quickly restored too. But it meant someone was actively working to damage the game's servers, and they had just landed the first blow. Unknown to everyone at the time, this marked the beginning of the end for the series. To understand why, we need to remember that backwards compatibility was critical to Media Molecule when they made Little Big Planet 2. It was necessary that, above all else, a sequel would not split the most important aspect of the series, its community. This meant that every level from the first game had to be playable in the second game. This same principle was applied to the third game as well. But achieving backwards compatibility for literally millions of levels is no small feat, especially when they need to actively keep track of player stats and level updates on top of all of that. So the solution that Media Molecule settled on was hosting all of the levels in the series on the same server in order to distribute this information across all 3 games simultaneously. It was an extremely effective solution to the problem, but opened up a much worse one in the long run. If there was a security vulnerability in one of the games, it was a vulnerability in all of the games. And the original Little Big Planet server was developed in 2008, which is practically ancient in terms of online security. So in other words, there was a gaping hole in the server security ready to be exploited at any time. It wasn't a matter of if, but a matter of when disaster would strike. On March 6, 2021, that day finally came. Anyone who attempted to play a level was met with the pop-up, "A problem occurred when attempting to connect to the Little Big Planet servers." Unknown to players at the time, the servers were experiencing a denial of service attack from a hacker who gained access. This effectively rendered most online features inaccessible across all games and caused a bunch of other problems. And as a result, on March 10th, Sumo Digital took the servers offline. 2 days later, the developers announced that the servers were taken down for technical issues and that they will return eventually. It wasn't until May that they came back online. But something wasn't right. Some people were experiencing bizarre crashes, and others were encountering strange or sometimes even hateful messages when viewing player profiles. So after a month, the servers were taken back offline. Over the next few months, the developers periodically posted to social media, ensuring that they were looking into things. Then, finally, on September 13th, they had something to announce. Service was back for Little Big Planet 3 on the PS4, albeit with some missing features. Every other game, including the PS3 version of LBP3, would never come back online. And for a time, things seemed fine. Although on June 9th, 2022, LBP.me was taken offline for a second time due to repeated attacks, and this time it never returned. On January 7th, 2024, over 30 different accounts were banned. All of them were notable community figures. Some were content creators, private server developers, and it even included Media Molecule's account and the game's active community manager, Steven Isbell. The next day, the game servers were taken back offline so that the developers could investigate what happened. By March, the servers were still offline. Then, out of nowhere, it was announced that the online servers for LBP3 were officially shutting down. There was no longer an official way to access community levels or play online with friends in the entire franchise. The final nail in the coffin came with the delisting of Little Big Planet 3 and its DLC from the PlayStation Store on the 31st of October. The game currently has no future prospects nor active staff working on the franchise. The community manager, Steven Isbell's last day ended November 29th, 2024. This meant the only game left standing in the franchise was Sackboy: A Big Adventure. A solid game, sure, but it could never replace the mainline games. And unfortunately, Sony hasn't expressed any interest in reviving the Little Big Planet series, instead choosing to leave yet another iconic mascot behind in favor of their others. Until Sony decides to do something new with the IP, Little Big Planet will forever be stuck in this limbo. And just like that, Little Big Planet had a sudden, unexpected death. While the future prospects of the series are currently quite bleak, Little Big Planet has definitely made a positive impact on the industry as a whole. Not only have other sandbox games since followed in its footsteps, but tons of developers got their start by making community levels. It also helped many other studios gain valuable experience, such as Tarsier Studios, who got their start working on assets and DLC for LBP, before going on to make Little Nightmares 1 and 2. Sumo Digital has gone on to make all sorts of different titles, such as Snake Pass, Team Sonic Racing, and more. Media Molecule went on to make Tearaway and then made Dreams, which is their latest title to date. It's less of a game, more of a game engine, and as a result struggled to find much of an audience as Little Big Planet ever did, even if it's a fantastic game in its own right. Multiple founders have left the company since then, and the future of it is quite uncertain, with no new titles announced. And while Little Big Planet as a franchise seems hopeless, fans at Trixel Creative have been working on a spiritual revival of the series with Restitched for PC. The game's been in development for years at this point, and it honestly seems quite promising. Hopefully it can fill the void left behind by its predecessor. Little Big Planet was truly special, and its sudden demise is a true gaming tragedy. Did you ever play any of these games? Which ones did you enjoy the most? Do you have any hope for the future of the Little Big Planet series? Let me know your thoughts on all of these in the comments and over on my Discord server, which will be linked in the description. Again, this style where I appear on camera is something new here, so I'd love to hear your feedback on the Discord as well. So send me a message when you join the server. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. With the rise of AI garbage on YouTube, I wanted to appear on camera to show that this stuff is genuinely being made by humans. I have a team that helps me make these, and I want to showcase their work in the best way possible, so this is how I plan on doing that moving forward. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. I will see you next time, and peace.
roller coaster for me. I didn't realize this, but as you can see from Insider Gaming, Mike Straw posted this. Portable PlayStation 6 won't be as powerful as the PS5, it's claimed. This is a roller coaster for me, because for one, I wasn't aware that they were planning on doing a straight up portable PS6. So already I'm like, what? And then they're saying it's going to be weaker than a PS5, which a next gen console that's going to be weaker than the last gen. What? So already I'm just all over the place, but let's read it and see what is being reported here. So Sony is reportedly developing a portable version of the PS6, but it doesn't look like, okay, we might need to proofread these, but doesn't look like it will be a true next gen experience for players. So I think it doesn't look like it. According to Kepler L2 on NeoGAF, take with a big old grain of salt, just gonna say. He's the same leaker that claimed that Sony's working on 2 SoCs for the PlayStation 6, which is like systems on chip or whatever. So it's 2 different SKUs, think of it that way. The portable version of the new console won't be as powerful as the current gen PS5. In a reply to a question about the handheld system, Kepler claims that it's a, quote, 15 watt SoC on 3 nanometer, which is like the new trend craziness, especially for handheld stuff. Seems like it's going to offer a ton of power savings and all sorts of craziness. While it's possible the final version of the device won't just be 15 watts, knowing that the SoC sits at that TDP gives an idea as to what to expect. For comparison purposes, the Steam Deck TDP is 15 watts, but can be lowered to improve battery life. The PS5 has 200 watts TDP. The Sony has yet to confirm the existence of a PlayStation 6 portable. Until Insider Gaming can independently verify the information or it becomes official, please take claims with a grain of salt. And that's literally all we have with it, okay? So this is the extent of it. But if you go with here, you can see back in September, Tom Henderson, the man, the myth, the legend, he also reported on this same rumor, which is that they're working on 2 different SKUs. One that would be a handheld and one that would be a more traditional console. Now let's, taking it with a grain of salt, let's explore this mentally. How many of you guys in the various chats would be interested in a portable handheld device that is significantly underpowered compared to its partnered console? Because here's the thing. People give the Xbox Series X crap because it's the weakest link in this chain that is console gaming. And that was roughly, like, it was a little bit more powerful than the One X was, right? So it's held back, like by definition, it's held back the generation because it's weaker than those, because it's requiring all the games that are made for Xbox are also made for that. And if it's cross-platform, even the games made for the PlayStation 5 Pro have to also work on the Series S, right? If it's fully cross-platform. So it's held that back. Imagine if Sony releases this PlayStation 6 handheld, portable, whatever. They release this and they require that all PlayStation games, PlayStation 6 games, have to also run on that handheld. We're talking about a bigger gap than even the Series S to the Series X, because or Series S to the next one, right? Like what we're talking about would be similar to them launching a PS5 and then a PS5 portable that is weaker than the PS4. That's basically what's being described. Now, TDP is not everything. There's all sorts of things with efficiency, with upscalers and things. It's not just about raw wattage, okay? And I think that's important to specify. We're not saying that like, oh, if the PS5 were a 4070 or 4060, then this is going to be weaker than that. It's going to be like a 3050. We're not saying that. We're talking about wattages. That's basically all that's going on here. But there is a rough rule of thumb that the more power your chip can consume and suck up, then the harder it can push out and the more it can do. But I really think, like Falcon says in Twitch chat, they're going to rely a lot on upscalers and stuff, similar to the Switch 2, which absolutely is requiring or relying a lot on those different techniques to allow it to render at a much lower resolution, which preserves power and is able to crank up efficiency. But just in concept, let's even say it's roughly in line power-wise with the PS5. I still like, I don't know, man. I don't love this trend of having a really underpowered console that holds back multi-platform releases. I just don't like it. I just don't. Okay. I understand that having a portable device or a cheaper device like a Series S is good for a sliver of the market that either couldn't afford the full Series X or that wants to play the games on the go. But I feel like when you do that on the console side, it is creating the lowest common denominator that literally by definition will hold everything back, because you have to develop for the weakest device. You just do. That's how it works. And so I feel like I just don't like it. I just don't like it. At least if you have like a Steam Deck, it's an option, but it's not required. If you release on PC and your game isn't Steam Deck verified, people go, oh, that's a bummer, but okay. It's not a big deal. But if you're talking about a PlayStation 6 portable and they require you to also support it fully day one, and it has to meet certain performance standards and metrics, that will hold back the game, because they don't have the option of just not being PlayStation Portable verified. They don't have the option of, like on Steam, oh, we're just not Steam Deck verified. They don't have that option. They have to get it approved there. Now, the other option for PlayStation is they don't actually connect the two. Think of what they did with like the PSP, right? Or like the Vita, where you have your own games basically, but you have like Uncharted on PlayStation 3, but then you also have the PS Portal version, or the PSP version, or the Vita, whatever. I don't see that as very likely, because you also are then splintering off your dev teams, and you're splintering off different resources, which I don't think they like. I think they like the idea of you having one team that works on God of War Egypt or whatever, and then they get to port that to the handheld, they port that to the PlayStation 6, they do backwards compatibility, whatever they do. So I just don't like it. I don't like this trend, and it seems like it's something Xbox is exploring as well. It may just be the new thing. I think really at the end of the day, the next 10 years of gaming is all going to be about scalability. I think that seems to be the case. They're not looking to have like really powerful consoles that set the bar and then everybody has to just push that bar. They're going to have a wide spread where they have the Series X, they have the Series S, they have the handheld device, they have the PlayStation 6, the PlayStation 6 Portable, they have the PlayStation 5 Pro, the PlayStation 5, and the goal is to just have games that can scale all the way across that like spectrum. And it's similar to how it works on PC. I mean, on PC, there are some games that, they have super high ceilings where if you have the power to push it, it can look shocking, like Cyberpunk. But if you need to run it on weaker hardware, you can do that too. And it may not look anywhere near as good, but you can technically run it. And I think that's the goal with the console games now, is they just want to build in a ton of scalability. But ultimately, it doesn't change the fact that when you have the weakest common denominator, that is where the floor is. You can't raise the floor at all. You can't push it, because you have to still be able to run on that weakest hardware. This generation, it's been the Series S. It just has been. Next generation, honestly, the next few years, it might be the Switch 2. I don't know. We'll see if the Switch 2 can compete relatively with the Series S in terms of like memory transfer speeds and different things like that, which have held back the Series S. But time will tell. But I think in the next few years, you'll see the Switch 2 be a big priority for multi-platform releases, I'm guessing. We really don't need so many handhelds. I mean, handhelds are they're becoming more and more popular. And I think it's a lot to do with the Switch being so successful. And then it's also a lot to do with like the Steam Deck and ROG Ally. Xbox is about to do their own. PlayStation kind of already did their own with the PS Portal, but they're going to do, it seems, an actual gaming device that plays the game natively. And I mean, people are buying them. People are interested. I own multiple handhelds. I have a Switch. I have a Switch OLED, and I've got my ROG Ally. Nikki has her Steam Deck. Like, we use these. It's nice. It's a good option. And I think it's weird that for basically 10 years, there was just no handheld devices. Everybody just kind of gave up on it. And then the Switch came out, was super popular, and people were like, oh, we can do this again. And they hop back on, but I don't know. It's, again, take it with a massive grain of salt, because this is literally, it's one guy, Kepler L2 on NeoGAF, and NeoGAF already as a source, you should be like, Yeah, you can see the full threads. Can match power PS5 in all parameters by 2028. Let's see. The thing is going to get torn to shreds for 50 watt TDP. Even with the Ally X's huge battery, that's only like 1 hour of battery life before you risk under 20%. With a more typical battery, like in the Steam Deck, try 30 minutes. With the Switch's battery, you're lucky to have 20 minutes of runtime. Yeah, that's the thing. Once you start cranking the wattages, like batteries are just, It's the thing that's held back electronics more than anything is battery technology. Like everything else, the power needed has skyrocketed with what we can do in terms of actual like chip design, but power delivery has always been the problem. And that's something where like batteries have just not really advanced to the same level. And so batteries have held back a lot of this tech. That's why you see like amazing advances with your phone, the displays, the processors, everything else. It's amazing what they can do. But the batteries really have not seen that big of a leap. You know, the source is not sourcing. The source is himself. Like the source is a leaker who says he's familiar with the like plans for the PlayStation 6. Again, you take all this with a massive grain of salt, but it jives with what we've heard from other rumors, from other sources suggesting that PlayStation's exploring another option. Like they're exploring handhelds basically. So we'll see. Power banks. I mean, that's basically what it requires. You get to the point where you just need a power bank with you when you do things. Like I told you guys, I played KCD2 on my RG Ally while I was on the plane flying back from the Bahamas when we went on vacation in early January. And for that, like we were on the plane for whatever it is, like 6-7 hours total. And so I just had to have my battery bank just plugged into the RG Ally, and it was just like a cable going off of it down into the pocket of the seat, and I just played like that, and it worked great. It was fine. But you just kind of have to mentally build in that you're going to need a power bank. But it was also like that back in the day with the OG Switch. I remember buying a power bank specifically for the Switch for longer gaming sessions. So it's just part of the equation, I guess. It's why I've also never been that like annoyed by the bad battery life on the RG Ally, because I always am just planning on bringing a battery bank with me. But I don't know. Is the Steam Deck OLED that much better than the normal deck? I mean, it does look really, really good. I don't know. For the average person, I don't think it's probably worth the price hike, but that's just me. I love OLED screens too, right? So for me, I would probably justify it in my head, but for the average person, probably not. Dream Corridor, thank you for the 5. Sony has never had the best luck directly exploring Nintendo's tactics. So I don't know if trying to fragment their console experience will work out. Yeah, I don't know either, but I can definitely see how an executive could think that's a really good idea. Because, I mean, can't you imagine like the Jim Ryans sitting around the conference table looking at the data for the Switch 2? They sold how many tens of millions of units? Dude, we got to do it. We got to do it. Hyperion Luke, do you think handhelds might be a way from these tech companies to sell lower cost options? Consider console prices will continue to skyrocket. I mean, that assumes that the price of the handhelds will be low. I'm not so sure about that. Like, I think everything will rise. All of the prices will rise. I mean, I do think if the question is also like, do I think that the series, like whatever they call it, the PlayStation 6, I think that probably starts at like 1,000 or like 900 to 1,000. I think they're going to crank it, dude. I think the Switch 2 has kind of set the precedent to crank the price a little bit higher, and they're already raising the price of the PlayStation 5 in international markets as well. I think they're just going to slowly step it up. PlayStation 5 Pro is 700. Next gen console, maybe they started at 700 for like the cheapest version, the digital version, and then the higher end version is like $800-900. I think they're just going to try to keep creeping it up, and they'll probably use the tariffs also as like a built-in excuse for it, because like the tariffs won't always be there, even if like they last for 4 years. After 4 years, like they probably go away with the next administration, even if they were to stay that way, or they get adjusted or whatever. But you better believe they're going to keep the prices high. Like I think if you see companies cranking the price of these consoles up, they're not going to magically be like, oh, we've lowered the prices now that they've gone away. I think they're seeing it as a golden opportunity to just keep it locked in. You know, do they have, they've learned anything from the PSP and Vita? I mean, I don't know if they're looking to that for inspiration. I think they're mainly looking to the Switch to try and learn from that. I think they made some mistakes with the Vita and PSP and stuff, mostly around the games and how they worked. But I think those problems can be avoided nowadays just with the tech that they have. So I think instead of having dedicated games just for the handheld device, they're going to try to have PlayStation 6 games or PS5 games playable on that device as well. And just require that they basically are in parity. Dream Corridor, thank you again. Very generous. My goodness.
Dream Corridor donated $10 through Super Chat. We're never going to see previous console worldwide sales numbers like the PS2 or even PS4 if price drops don't happen. Unless GTA V is a system seller beyond all imagination.
Yeah, I think people are being more tactical with their purchasing. GTA 6 will do gangbuster numbers, of course. I think that will help. But yeah, it's just the world changes, you know. Prices rise and people have to be a little bit more careful. And you know, back when the PS4 was cheap, I mean, I remember the PS4 Slim refresh model being 300 across the board and stuff like that. I think people would have one console in their living room, one console in their bedroom, one console in their gaming room. I knew people that had multiple PS4s all throughout their house, and they would just bounce around depending on where they were playing. Nowadays, I don't think that's anywhere near as common. You know, I think people will buy the one console and just call it a day. But you know, time will tell. Time will tell. I don't think I'm much less cynical when it comes to the industry. A lot of people are like, "Oh, Nintendo priced this at Nintendo priced these games at 80. The gaming crash is coming. Get ready. Everything's about to go belly up." I'm not convinced that that's the case. I mean, I like I said, I think the gaming crash already like started 2 years ago, but it's specifically a AAA gaming crash for AAA games from third party devs. I think that's already started to happen. Like you've already seen Warner Brothers, EA, Take-Two, like they've canned tons of their big AAA projects, and it's because of games like Forspoken. Square Enix is probably the biggest guy that's like suffering, but you've seen them cancel a ton of those games, and it's because of games like Saints Row, Forspoken. Like there's just tons of these third-party AAA games that just hemorrhaged money. He took my thing. Red flag, red flag.
16 times the detail.
Recommended to me by some people in chat who said it's very, very good. Basically, one of the frustrations I've had for a long time and that I've expressed on stream, and I didn't know this video existed, but it seems to argue for the similar thing, is basically that it feels like a lot of developers and publishers nowadays rely on things like upscalers, rely on things like frame generation, rely on things like FSR, whatever, to hit frame rate and resolution targets that should be the minimum. So if the resolution target is, say, 1440p at 30, and then they'll upscale it to 4K 30. It seems like a lot of studios are using the upscalers to get to that level without just hitting the native goal. Like they're relying or using these upscalers and these other techs as a crutch instead of optimizing the game fully to where it needs to be. And to be clear, this isn't necessarily just because of the developers being, you know, lazy or taking shortcuts. Usually this is because the publishers are not giving them enough time to polish the game to that point, so they just have to get it out the door. A great example would be like Star Wars Jedi Survivor, a really, really, really good game, but that game ran like garbage when it launched, really unfortunately so. And part of the reason it ran like garbage was because of its over-reliance on upscalers like FSR that just made everything look really muddy. It wasn't optimized well enough, so when you got into open world sections, it ran like garbage. They've patched it. Apparently it's way better now, but that was a huge problem when it first launched. And this video kind of outlines similar stuff, and funnily enough, has an entire chapter titled Why Epic Games and Unreal Engine is the Biggest Problem. So let's see what they have to say. This is from Threat Interactive, and let's see what they've got.
Is an investigative report addressing the most negative aspects affecting modern game development, specifically the deterioration of realistic graphics and the manufactured increase in computing cost.
And I was gonna make a joke about people being made ugly or like Sweet Baby or something. It's not even funny anymore. It's just this is where we are.
I am Kevin Jimenez, the founder of Threat Interactive, a new game production studio aiming to unlock the full potential this next generation of gaming can provide. And we'll show just how by the end of this video. There are three interconnected factors that need to be addressed: creativity, performance, and visuals. Let's begin with creativity. Several videos online are already bringing awareness to the decreasing quality of gameplay, open worlds, and the microtransactions affecting the majority of games.
The two biggest video game makers in America now make most of their money not from people buying games, but on subscriptions and spending within those games.
In fact, Electronic Arts and Take-Two Interactive both make a staggering 75% of their money from what's called microtransactions.
However, I personally loathe the popular critique that photorealistic games are not fun, they lack art style, and we need worse graphics to fix it. This defeatist attitude is a byproduct of modern development, not visual progress. As industry game developer veterans put it, one thing you do is 10 things you don't. Currently, graphics dominate the do list, leaving gameplay and art style in the don't category.
That's a good way of putting it. One thing you do is 10 things you don't. I like that. That's really succinct. It's like what Todd Howard used to say in all those interviews he would give in the development of like Skyrim and Fallout 3 and stuff, where he said, we can do anything, we just can't do everything. And I think that that's the same vibe that's basically being put forward here, is that you can do a lot, but every time you choose to pursue a specific course, you are sacrificing other things that get left behind.
Graphics are currently in a chaotic state, but once the entire developer industry can easily create highly performant photorealism within their engines, competition can begin to solely focus on art direction and gameplay. But recent opportunities for outstanding games with captivating stories and incredible gameplay have been tarnished by the next two factors. 30 FPS on next-gen consoles is unacceptable for many reasons. It appears choppy and promotes a reliance on accessibility such as motion blur. 30 FPS also induces extreme judder and motion on numerous screens. With only 30 frames, the quality of gameplay logic and basic responsiveness falls short, especially when tons of other titles offer that same basic responsiveness. There are numerous 8th generation console titles that ran near photorealistic visuals at 60 FPS, and that was on 2013 2 teraflop hardware, so 30 FPS titles like Spider-Man PS4 are kind of excused here. But modern studios are churning out these half-baked games with absurd requirements, creating an illusion that 13 teraflop 2021 architecture isn't powerful enough for basic photorealistic performance standards set years ago.
And I think that's the most jarring thing, is that, like, to a certain extent, I think a lot of people have felt deceived coming out of the PS4 era into the PS5 era. It's like, we paid for all new hardware, all these new consoles that are on paper way more powerful, but it doesn't feel like the leap has been there. And I understand like the argument that it's just diminishing marginal returns, that as time goes by, you know, it's, if you look at it as just a line, if this was like the original PlayStation, the PS2 is a huge leap, you know, it's massive. The PS3 is maybe a smaller leap, but it's still pretty significant. The leap then to the PS4 is maybe to here, so it's again a good jump, but not that big. And then the leap to the PS5 is even smaller. I understand that we're talking about diminishing marginal improvements. I get that. But it also doesn't change the fact that it feels like we should see at least some improvement. But in a lot of cases, it feels like games are running worse and looking worse. I feel like Forspoken looks worse than almost all of those other games that came out 10 years ago. It ran worse. Gotham Knights as well. Jedi Survivor definitely ran worse. When it was fixed, it started looking better, but it definitely did not look that great at launch. RoboCop, I think, was fine, but it's been a minute since I looked at it. Alan Wake 2, also a really good-looking game, but as for all these other ones, yeah, I can see that.
This leads us to our final issue. The basic standard of 60 FPS is only offered at the cost of our next and biggest problem: visuals. I firmly advocate for photorealism, but the industry is advancing in it in a manner that is worthless during basic movement, through a cancer in real-time rendering. A graphics programming scapegoat that is destroying every game in its path. It's called TAA, and that stands for Temporal Anti-Aliasing. And this includes upscalers. There are great videos trying to bring awareness about this, but Digital Foundry has an ignorant video that is quickly spreading inaccurate information that is damaging real-time rendering. I will expose false narratives as I show why TAA has ruined modern optimization trends in conjunction with an abusive use of the power offered in current generation consoles.
Okay.
TAA and upscalers stem from anti-aliasing.
Old school Linus. Wow. That's like getting hit in the face with a bucket of cold ice water. Wow, Linus. Oh, old school Linus is something else, man. I remember watching these videos. Remember when he was still making them in that house that they had rented, and it was just a house in some neighborhood, but they had their whole studio based out of it. That's when I got into Linus Tech Tips, way back in the day, before the new studio, before everything. And now, you know, it's very corporate and professional, but those were the days, man. He used to film videos in just a straight up kitchen, like on the kitchen island. It was great.
That aim to mimic the benefits of 4K plus rendering, because 4K 60 FPS on affordable hardware, including that generation consoles, isn't feasible. True 4K or higher rendering ensures smooth edges on objects, better sampling on textures, thin objects, and specular highlights. As you decrease the resolution, stair-stepping aliasing emerges, and thin details on meshes and specular highlighting breaks apart. FXA addresses stair-stepping for a cheap cost, but introduces noticeable blur on the entire image.
Yeah, it just kind of smooths everything out, for sure. I mean, one of the perks of 4K, at least in theory, is that once you hit 4K, on smaller displays, you probably don't even need to do any extra anti-aliasing because the resolution's just high enough that it can smooth it out just natively. But as screens have gotten bigger, that's also become a problem because you can still spot it.
SMAA eliminates these same edges without any blur, making it much more superior. In fact, the only advantage 4K downsample to 1080p versus 1080p with just SMAA applied is thin detail and specular sampling. But modern TAA is designed to run at any resolution by jittering the rendering view in 8 or more positions as frames are generated. After pixel reprojection logic is calculated and designed, the past frames are combined, creating an 8K-like resolution addressing thin, undersampled objects and specular highlighting. But all versions of these designs have several issues. Temporal designs are destructive to object or character motion within view. The problems I'm about to show aren't usually visible under a slower threshold of motion, which is why the industry markets with slow cinematic trailers or graphical showcases. But motion produced from gameplay gets annihilated with ghosting, blur, and smearing visuals.
Yeah, ugh, gross. Ew, gross, stinky. Look at the line. Oh, the ghosting. This was part of the problem with it. It's also like all these games that have dense grass and stuff, we have better like memory capacity on modern consoles and stuff. So you see grasses like and foliage being cranked up, but these upscaling techniques and anti-aliasing techniques cannot handle it. And so it just makes it look like you're walking in a field of smushed kale.
This is why still or slow image quality comparisons by major tech influencers are both worthless and misleading. What's the point in playing a realistic game that looks like this during basic player interactions? YouTube compression conveniently hides these effects of TAA and is usually mistaken for video compression artifacts.
This is why I go through these trailers and pause them and point out these things, like in that Crimson Desert video we just looked at, where we pause it, we zoom in, enhance, and look at it. Because like it's something when it's in a compressed YouTube video, you might not notice, but when you play the game, when you have your hands on the controller, you will notice it. It is something that you'll pick up on. So, you know, these videos are filmed, edited, and presented in the way that covers it up as best they can, because they, of course, don't want to focus on the downsides of the current game and how it looks and runs. But it's important if you're going to spend $70 freaking dollars on something that you be aware of it at least.
The 4K on YouTube resembles native uncompressed 1080p more than actual native uncompressed 4K. Chances are you're playing games through an HDMI or better, meaning your game's image quality is uncompressed. Temporal solutions and motion degrade resolution similar to low bitrate video compression. So having TAA on your gameplay is like adding compression to your gaming experience. Because of current hardware prices that aren't changing anytime soon, 1080p and 1440p remain the most consumer-friendly target resolutions.
Oh my god, dude. Look at that. Look at that monstrosity. Oh! Look dead center of the frame. Look at that ghosting, man. Oh my god. Man.
But TAA ruins these resolutions the most. TAA and upscalers not only ruin affordable gaming resolutions, but also damage luxury resolutions for those with enthusiast-grade graphic GPUs. TAA and upscalers are often bundled with ugly sharpeners that fail to fix ghosting or restore the original clarity and detail stripped away from smearing. The FTAA subreddit, up until the creation of the r/motion clarity subreddit, remained the only online community where consumers could finally speak loud against the industry's oxymoron stance on realistic graphics, and they've listed hundreds of games with forced TAA, with recent titles throwing out traditional AA options for upscaling methods only. Remember the SMAA versus 4K comparisons earlier? You could get the same sampling quality on thin and specular by reusing a single pass frame, which means long ghosting trails, blur, and smearing could be eliminated. I personally compiled several pieces of data showing these temporal methods could be redesigned.
Dude, there's an entire subreddit named that. That's great. Oh, that's funny. There's an entire subreddit dedicated to it. That's funny.
Designed to prevent all these hideous motion issues, which are listed in the video description. But a clear and good TAA will never become mainstream because the smeary nature of current temporal solutions are being exploited to cover up lazy and cheap development practices. In hundreds of game titles, if you can fully disable temporal solutions, you are punished severely with numerous rendering problems. temporal dithering, and frame blending dependent rendering aspects. Bloom. Soft shadows. Denoise replacement for ray trace shadows. Ambient occlusion. Screen space contact shadows. Vegetation, fur, hair. Screen space reflections. Global illumination. Translucent materials. Clouds. Dithering to hide geometric camera clipping. Mesh introductions. And ray trace reflections. Strip away TAA in several engines and these effects transform into an incomprehensible mess or reveal a poor approach to an aspect of rendering. These are the supposed fixes and optimizations offered by temporal anti-aliasing and upscalers. But an industry lie perpetuated by Digital Foundry's TAA video is the claim that TAA and upscalers enable developers to optimize these effects by rendering them at lower resolutions, allowing TAA to smooth them with supposedly no cost. But if you do some digging, you'll discover older deferred titles from under a decade ago, rendering the same basic effects independently of temporal frame smearing with similar or better performance and or similar better visual quality. And guess what? If you need extra performance from a demanding feature, that feature can be programmed to run at a lower resolution and or include its own temporal accumulation without blurring the entire frame. Modern implementations of last gen's basic visuals perform more poorly because studios leverage the power of 9th generation consoles to cut financial costs on legitimate optimization processes for faster releases. The financial...
Which checks out. I mean, especially when you consider how expensive the current development processes are, that they're still this expensive even with corners being cut like this. You know, it's pretty remarkable.
Savings don't end there, though. TAA and upscalers enable studios to save money by integrating these popular and fully developed temporal algorithms into their engines instead of investing in the development of genuinely high-performing and self-resolving effects. Since TAA, a large portion of rendering advancement papers tie in TAA or mention an upscaler such as DLSS as a required condition to solve some issue with the design. Speaking of DLSS, people only label it better than native because DLSS is always compared to native with TAA applied. Anything compared to the worst case scenario will appear improved. The so-called best TAA algorithms are needlessly expensive and brand specific. First, I have a bone to pick with DLAA. DLAA uses too many pass frames for reconstruction, which causes two problems: long ghosting trails and significant blurring in motion compared to native with SMA or stationary output. It also fails to smooth stair-stepping in motion compared to SMAA. Applying Circus Method with the newest DLL provides much better results, even though both examples are rendered at 1080p. But Circus Method isn't cheap. DLA at 1080p on a desktop 12GB 3060 costs 0.75 milliseconds. Circus Method bumps it up to 2.44 milliseconds. Image quality is far from poor, but its proprietary nature, cost, and Blue Moon AI mistakes makes it unreliable for the industry. XeSS 1.3 native AA mode suffers from the same problems as DLAA, but costs 1.44 milliseconds at 1080p on the same machine. Applying Circus Method gets image quality almost indistinguishable from Circus Method DLSS, but costs 4.6 milliseconds.
Jesus.
Next is Unreal's TSR. It's a little more complex because it implements Circus Method natively, but I give it the fairest shot possible by using UE 5.4's more optimized implementation. It's easy to appear superior to Unreal's TAA, but TSR suffers from a specific hazy fizzle appearance that video compression doesn't present well enough to pair with my criticism of that aspect. But besides whether or not you think it looks fine or not, the biggest issue again is the cost when set by the maximum quality settings for anti-aliasing. It puts TSR 10 times the cost of TAA and stands around 3 milliseconds on a 3060 at native 1080p. That's the difference between 60 FPS and 50 FPS. Still not convinced it's too expensive? Let's look at the DCIMA TAA again from 2017. These are PS4 timings, and they didn't go with SMA because of the cost combined with temporal reprojection, so they went with a sharpened FXAA fallback for their 2-frame TAA instead. But what if they used SMAA instead? We would get 0.36 milliseconds versus both unreasonable TSR timings. With such a low base cost, and these results at 30 FPS, if we wanted to keep AAA cost under 1 millisecond on modern affordable hardware, We could catapult the quality even further with 60 FPS and use that 0.73 milliseconds of headroom with aspects such as SMA or advanced motion vectors. Meanwhile, if TSR was put under the same scenario on screen, I guarantee you it would look like a slime show even at 60 FPS. These are TAA design requisites that must be combined to keep TAA computations costs low and stop it from producing the poor image quality we've settled for more than a decade now. But effect dependency is preventing progress.
And part of this is like, once it becomes a standard, there's not much to like revolutionize it. Because I mean, the average, again, the average gamer, are they really going to notice this type of thing? Like, they're probably like, it looks a little, it doesn't look that great, or it doesn't run that great, or it's a little blurrier. But I think the average gamer is probably not picking up on a lot of this, which is why they can get away with it, basically. Again, this is Threat Interactive. I see you asking who it was. It's Threat Interactive on YouTube.
Unreal has long been founded on this dependency, and still heavily does. UE5 is set to worsen this industry problem because it's going to dominate the production of titles coming this generation, and Epic and its partners like CD Projekt Red have no concern over this matter. The Unreal documentation goes so far to claim that FXAA results in a loss of fidelity compared to their temporal methods, which you should be aware by now is only a half-truth. They also provide misleading information about TSR, presenting it as a method to achieve near 4K quality with just 1080p input. Of course, they showcase this with a stationary example. In reality, 540p with sufficient temporal jitter and accumulation can resolve an 8K resolution image with a stationary camera. Out of context fairy tales like this are damaging game development.
Yeah, it's the old saying from Mark Twain, I believe, which was, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. And with a lot of this stuff, like you can find any collection of data to prove your point if you twist it and bend it just enough, where it's like, see, this side by side, it looks way better than just rendering natively. Which it's like, yeah, well, it's a still frame, and when you're actually playing the video game and things are in motion, it's not going to look significantly better than if you were rendering natively. Like, it's not going to retain detail, it's not going to enhance detail, it's not going to do any of that because it introduces all these other cascading artifacts and things. But you know, when this is the standard, this is just what everybody's doing, and it becomes the meta.
Another out of context narrative Epic Games is pushing is that Nanite has a faster way to render geometry and aims to eliminate the LOD pop-in association. Nanite does not increase performance unless you abuse your scene with extreme overdraw. I've compiled many tests on the specific Unreal's forums thread that proves this. Nanite can cost as much as next-gen lighting, and pop-in will still remain a part of your gaming experience because shadows, skeletal meshes, foliage, and open-world partitions will still introduce pop. Even Brian Karras has stated Nanite can have worse performance on optimized meshes, but stated users still enable it to save disk space. This comment is a perfect example showing Epic Games' flawed position on what modern games really need. It doesn't matter if your highly detailed open-world game is 100 megabytes, but can't perform at a decent resolution and frame rate. Optimized meshes don't even require Nanite compression. But studios who use Nanite save themselves money by not investing in quality LODs, and not investing in mesh introduction transitional effects that would give you better results. A good practice used on optimized game meshes is the use of bitmaps for subpixel detail, such as the words on these quixel stones. Nanite encourages and is designed to render subpixel detail geometrically instead of textures, which causes extreme pixel crawl and artifacting, which, you guessed it, can only be fixed by intense temporal frame smearing, creating a manufactured and limited scenario where flawed TAA appears as a better option. I understand the time and quality issues related to making good LODs, but Nanite is the worst solution to this problem. UE5.
It is kind of funny that so much of this stuff nowadays is like, yeah, well, we're going to retain the quality with things like Nanite, but then we're just going to fix it by blurring everything and smearing it so that it looks better, I guess. Like it's just, it's funny how they create a problem in their attempt to solve a different one, and then they fix it by undoing the solution that they just produced. You know, it's,
I will dominate all other options because this engine excels in support. I'm talking asset packages formatted specifically for Unreal, hundreds of documentations, shared public content, overwhelming logic support. Epic Games provides hundreds of free, basic, but high-quality assets when you use Unreal. Every major third-party vendor with game-related software always prioritizes support for Unreal. Unreal offers a unique amount of support for critical tools for basic workflows like animation and debuggers. It's intuitive to use in comparison with competitor UI and programming designs. For studios, finding individuals to hire is made easy due to the widespread popularity and adoption of the engine.
It's also part of the reason that companies like CDPR are looking at it, because talent is like one of the biggest things that people just don't talk about in the games industry right now. Like, it's something Mark Alexis Cotier in that talk just a couple weeks ago mentioned. He was like, right now it is extremely difficult to find the qualified talent that has histories of releasing games. Like, they're not out there looking for jobs. Either they have a good job at a big studio and they haven't left yet because they're senior, or they've gone off and founded their own studio and are working independently. Like, it's really tough to find experienced talent. So one of the ways these companies are finding ways to acquire new talent is by like hiring people right out of college that are familiar with Unreal Engine, and then they get them when they're fresh out of school, and then they build them up into the talent that they need, which they can do quicker because Unreal Engine is so familiar to people. They don't have to spend 6 months or a year teaching people how to use their tools. It's like that other interview we watched with Will Shen, the former Quest director, I believe was his title, with Bethesda Game Studios. And he said that he was spending a lot of time making tutorials, using OBS to make tutorial videos, teaching people at the studio, new hires, how to use the creation engine and their tool set, which is an insane thing when you think about it. Using an amazingly like qualified guy, having him spend his time making video tutorials on how to use their tools, that's insane. What a waste of his talent, right? Versus just using a tool set people already know how to use, which saves everybody time, right? So there's like a bunch of benefits to using a tool set like this, but there's also downsides as they're outlining.
Advantage Unreal has acquired by simply existing as long as it has the way it has. That makes it the go-to for software and digital media. But the engine designs and its leadership should not be at the forefront of next-gen graphics development for critical reasons I'll outline right now. Epic provides 30 FPS presets in Unreal because they don't believe it's inadequate on 9th generation consoles. Look at Fortnite 5.4's performance. The design is CPU intensive, sure, but the art style is simplistic enough to, even with GI, it should provide a computational advantage. Yet it's one of the hardest games to run on the GPU side, even with a 60 FPS or high preset enabled. If this is the best performance offered by the engine's creators, of course it'll defend 30 FPS when basic realism or complex stylized visuals come into play. Epic has no experience making realistic games. The Matrix Awakens is not a game. It's a visually exciting 30 FPS demo with enough motion blur to hide the 30 FPS screen judder. Consumers who didn't own a 9th generation console at the time saw the 60 FPS tag on the YouTube presentation and assumed that was the case. People who did experience the demo firsthand were given basic interaction through a locked aiming system that wouldn't expose the fluidity issues of 30 FPS.
It's very sneaky, isn't it? It's very sneaky. I see what you're doing.
Epic has no problem abusing the flaws of their TAA or temporal upscalers such as DLSS for several effects I've shown throughout this video. Epic defaults their engine to rely on temporal smearing when very few TAA independent features remain undocumented and hidden behind loopholes most unsuspecting developers will never find. They shamelessly promote heavy and blurry temporal upscaling as a viable solution on 9th generation consoles. And the biggest problem with Epic and their perspective on game development is that Fortnite drives their motivations for Unreal's development. Fortnite is a game with a very unique and uncommon problem the engine has to accommodate for. It's an open world map with a dynamic time of day and weather. This means real-time GPU calculations need to be computed per frame to account for those dynamic changes. What makes these calculations so much more expensive in Unreal is the fact that Fortnite's entire environment is destructible. This is why more realistic open worlds from 8th generation console titles have no problem with day or weather cycles even though they don't use light maps. Because their environment, or in other words primary source of indirect lighting, is mostly static. These games use lighting solutions that bait small, memory-efficient indirect lighting hints that your GPU doesn't have to compute. This way your GPU just calculates how these pre-computed hints correlate to the dynamic lights and shadows.
This is one thing that was huge in the PS4 era that is not really, as far as I understand it, that common nowadays, was that so many of these games from that era baked in a ton of the detail, like a lot of it. There was, of course, Last of Us Part 2 is probably the most common example people have brought up of just a very beautiful game running on, again, 2013 hardware. And this would be considered phenomenal graphics for a 2024 game. If something came out like this, it would probably be one of the best looking games of the year. And this was running on 2013 hardware. Okay, like that's crazy. Technically, I guess this was probably 2016 hardware because it's running on the PS4 Pro, but still, I mean, wildly impressive graphically. But it's because they were able to bake in a ton of stuff, and it's also a proprietary engine that is custom built for that. But it's just, I think with a lot of this stuff, it's I hadn't really thought of it before, but I think it is absolutely true that Unreal is building Epic first and foremost with Fortnite in mind. So they build the engine to excel at that very specific use case. But a lot of these companies that are using it are not using it in the way that Fortnite uses the engine. They don't build it the same way. And so a lot of those optimizations and specializations for Unreal Engine aren't really utilized. And so you suffer all the downsides without any of the upside.
These lighting systems have their own limitations, but not a whole lot that can't be accelerated or overcome using 9th Gen's hardware full potential. Fortnite's GI, which is Unreal's Lumen, can't let developers with the common environmental properties bake any high-quality indirect lighting hints that save you performance. Unreal's light maps are uninterpolatable and have serious leaking problems that can only be mitigated with stupid amounts of VRAM memory. So many Unreal games are wasting performance for basic visual standards because your GPU is computer whether or not a Fortnite wall has been destroyed or what that wall looks like, etc. Lumen is noisy without TAA because it isn't designed to use stable or high-quality indirect lighting hints. So top that inefficiency off in games with other Epic game technologies like Nanite, Virtual Shadow Maps, and TSR, and we're left with games created faster than ever and as inefficient and as terrible in motion as ever. When this happens over and over again, it standardizes, which is why other studios are following these inefficient designs for their mostly static games that could use faster systems. Epic Games' indifference towards underperforming or poor visuals that appear in third-party Unreal games is the statement that big budget studios should be customizing Unreal source code to provide more appropriate designs for their titles. True, but it's almost a catch-22. If a studio decides to use Unreal, it shows they lack the funding, interest, and or innovation to manage the graphics themselves. This is exactly what happens when established studios throw out proprietary engines in favor of what Unreal offers. I have one more problem with Epic that I need to cover. Unreal is used for the automotive, film, simulation, and construction industries. That wouldn't be a problem if Epic wasn't constantly accounting for this user base and modeling Unreal with algorithms not meant for consumer-efficient real-time rendering. Amidst of these issues, I gave Epic the benefit of the doubt and made a feedback thread on the Unreal developer forums 12 months ago, requesting the prioritization of game development and a larger focus on temporal smearing independence within their various effects. In only 11 months, it was voted as the #1 feedback from developers, replacing the previous #1 feedback thread made 3 years ago. Epic released several Unreal versions, including nothing pertaining to the thread's request, despite a solid number of educated developers ready to progress beyond Epic's limited vision for this generation of games.
They're like, please, listen to us, please. Epic's like, no.
Gaming. This studio was created to begin the production of an intense action game based on a new IP consisting over 700 pages of detailed story and scenarios. Our game is conventional due to only requiring a mostly static world with dynamic lights, making our goals much more relevant to many developers and gamers. We have paused the production of our game, so our unrivaled passion for motion clarity and performance standards for untainted photorealism can be met, which is why our solution is to create a custom Unreal via crowdfunding with custom systems that directly address the giant issues stated in this video. Don't think.
Yeah, and I think they could get there. Basically, Thread Interactive, they do they're making a game, but they use their expertise to make these videos, breaking it down, and it's very valuable insights. I mean, my hope is, of course, that Epic wakes up and pays attention to the feedback from a lot of devs. But this has been, you know, the old problem where a lot of these games have stereotypical problems, which you can always point to and be like, oh, well, it's an Unreal Engine game. Oh, it's got terrible stutter when you enter new areas or with new effects because it didn't compilate or compilate shaders and things, or compilate. Did I just use that word? Compile. That's the word. And so there's plenty of stuff to poke holes in and plenty of stuff to look at, but hopefully Epic just listens to it and devote some resources to it. My other hope is with companies like CDPR partnering with them. CDPR, which pretty clearly has a very capable staff of engineers that worked on their Red engine for years. My hope is that they can go to Epic and be like, listen, we got to fix this. We got to do that. We got to do this. We got to do that. And that they can help enhance the engine to work better for these types of games. That's my hope. Worst case scenario is that they work on it and it just, you know, The Witcher 4 ends up having problems very similar to every other Epic game where it's like, it runs good at 30 FPS because you can kind of motion blur away a lot of the problems. But anything beyond that, it really struggles. I hope that's not the case. I hope they can work on it and improve it, but time will tell. Please summarize the video. Basically, there is a consensus with a lot of these developers across the industry with different engines, different, you know, technologies and solutions for their rendering pipelines, that they can use temporal solutions to fix issues within the image to hit certain frame rate targets. Yeah, anyway, but as for the video, again, it's the temporal solutions have some benefits, but most of it is downsides. And with so many companies moving over to Unreal Engine, which has an over-reliance on temporal solutions to smooth out a lot of other problems, it's creating an industry standard, which is not good and which people should not be okay with because it creates that standard Unreal Engine performance issue. It creates issues that will echo across many, many releases. And because Epic's doing it and so many other companies are using Epic, or using Unreal Engine, a lot of studios are just getting used to it. There's other problems with other solutions like DLSS, you know, and these other upscalers that don't actually deal with the optimization issues. They are just a patchwork over the problem, and they're hoping that gamers don't notice. And I think eventually they will notice. What happened to Unity? What didn't happen to Unity? Unity has lots of problems themselves. Most of Unity's problems were executive led, where basically they had extremely greedy means of trying to monetize it. They moved it from charging you royalties based on like how much money you're generating. They tried to rework it into per install. So if you had a mobile game installed, you would have to pay for that. If you had demos installed, you'd have to pay for that. Like, it would basically bankrupt countless indie studios. It would be extremely bad. So a lot of people bailed on Unity and they moved over to Unreal, and they announced their new games are coming in Unreal, and you know, Unity lost all confidence with devs. So even though they walked a lot of that back because people freaked out, they just lost all confidence and trust with everybody, and so they just decided to move on. But they did it to themselves. You know, you can't really blame people for moving away from them. CD, thank you for that. CD Media, the biggest issue is...
The industry needs Unreal devs. If people only worked on the Red Engine or Decima, they aren't replaceable if they leave. Getting everyone on Unreal is a staffing problem that studios are trying to solve.
Yeah, I think it will make talent more interchangeable, so it'll make it easier for devs to move from one studio to another because everybody will be familiar with the same tools. I think that will certainly help because, you know, it's just everybody will not... You won't need to spend 6 months learning how to do your job before you can start doing your job. You'll be able to just get hired and start doing your job, and that's a big benefit. The other benefit of it being there is that, again, everybody... all the money and all the focus goes to this one platform, this one tool set. And so that tool set gets the collected benefit of all those companies' expertise, where CDPR can tell them, hey, we need this to make this game run better. And so they work on that. And then this other company comes in and says, hey, we're making a first-person shooter single-player game, Halo. And we need this done. And so Epic works on that and adds that to the engine. And so the hope is that everybody kind of works together and it makes the industry more simpatico, and everybody works together and makes it better and better. Hopefully that's what happens. What might happen is that all games start to look and feel the same, and all the problems that affected this one game affect all the other games. And so it's just a little hard to tell right now, but yeah, it's just what happens when there's not more competition. You know, that's what happens. But I also don't blame devs, because running a game development studio is hard enough. Running a game dev studio and a software company to develop an engine at the same time is extra difficult. He took my thing. Red flag, red flag.
Johnny Somali, bro, he's having a
down payment on a house, or you buy a mid-range PC. Over the years, in 2025, you either make a down payment on a house or you buy a mid-range PC. Over the years, video game graphics have evolved far beyond what we ever could imagine to be possible. Pores in the skin, motion capture technology, photorealistic shadows and reflections that adjust themselves properly in real time, and that was 2018. Now we have pores in the skin, motion capture technology, photorealistic shadows and reflections that adjust themselves in real time at sub 60 frames per second with the most powerful gaming GPU on the market, accompanied with ghosting, poppin', input lag, flickering, motion blur without motion blur. What the happened? I'm a simple gamer, and I like to think that I play a variety of different genres. The Last of Us, Danganronpa, Silent Hill, Red Dead, Hentai Girl Karen, Fortnite. But in recent years, I've found myself using mods more and more just to get my games to run well. Back in 2017, I owned a $600 PC, and I played PUBG, Skyrim, Assassin's Creed, and Borderlands on it all the time. But nowadays, it's hard to run any modern title on a PC under $1,500, or at least it's hard to make the games look good. Yes, of course technology and graphics evolve over time, but it's clear that things have gotten a little disproportionate, especially when the beefiest, dump truckiest GPUs struggle to run games and don't even break the 60 FPS mark. I'm talking, of course, about the rapidly spreading virus in gaming right now known as bad optimization. But what killed optimization? Why do developers not care for their games to run good and look good at the same time, and instead exclusively prioritize making them appealing to the eyes? Well, like many topics, it's not so black and white, and there are a lot of reasons, and starting with the first 13th reason why,
let's say
upscaling technology. In the past few years, artificial intelligence has evolved at an alarming rate. AI is being used everywhere. We have AI-generated videos like this Coca-Cola ad I got, AI-generated essays, AI-generated songs, AI-generated comments, which is worthy of a whole different video in itself, and of course, AI-generated graphics. Well, not completely AI-generated. Upscaling technology in video games works like this. The game runs at a lower resolution like 1080p, and then it gets upscaled to a higher resolution like 1440p. In theory, this will make your game look like it normally would at base resolution, but that's not necessarily true. Even on a quality setting, some problems just become glaring. In Fortnite, there's some serious shadow flickering and fuzziness going on in some areas, and in Red Dead Redemption 2, it may not seem too different at first glance, but look at how the game looks when it starts raining. What the f? AI has to guess what the game will look like at a higher resolution, and as a result, the game will never look like how the developers intended with upscaling on. I really care about vision and artistic direction, and I can't help but feel like DLSS and FSR are quick and easy solutions to improve frame rate, but molest the original concept. DLSS, or Deep Learning Super Sampling, NVIDIA's upscaling technology, has settings you can choose from, such as quality, balance, performance, and ultra performance. What this does is lower the base resolution of the game, so instead of upscaling 1080p to 1440p, it'll upscale 720p or 480p to 1440p. The lower the base resolution, the more inaccurate the upscale. And for real, who the hell even plays on performance modes? DLSS is only enabled on RTX cards anyway, and I'm pretty sure all of those cards are capable enough for gamers to not have to submit to the worst case scenario to enjoy a video game. Oh shit. Another AI-generated solution modern NVIDIA GPUs are utilizing is the brand spanking new frame generation method. What this does is it takes 2 frames from your game and will use AI to interpret what a middle frame would look like. So basically, your frame rate will go from 30 to 60. This will inevitably cause input lag, but for laid-back gamers who use wireless controllers, that won't be much of an issue, since wireless controllers obviously have input lag already, so it really depends on what game you're playing. Now, I already know a lot of you guys are probably thinking, just one N? Upscaling? Frame generation? This is the future of gaming. Now I can play GTA 6 on my RTX 20 Ti. And my response to that is short-term solutions cause long-term problems, and it's already happening. Yes, upscaling technology allows gamers to not spend $1 bajillion on a new GPU, but what it also does is encourage developers to not optimize their games since they know, hey, gamers will just turn DLSS on anyway to make the game run good. I just beat the Silent Hill 2 remake. It came out this October and it was nothing short of mind-blowing. It was also PC-blowing because my computer sounded like a Russian bomber jet trying to run the damn thing. Still loved it to death though, and was rooting for it at the Game Awards. Come on, Luke Roberts.
And the winner is...
Come on, Luke Roberts.
Melinda Jurgen.
If we check the recommended specs for Silent Hill 2, it suggests using DLSS to play the game at a high setting on the recommended graphics card. Silent Hill 2 looks incredible, but it's also Silent Hill 2. The entire game is set in these liminal spaces, so it shouldn't be too difficult to run, even if it looks realistic. Well, if we install the Sunny Hills mod, which turns the town of Silent Hill into a normal small town on a beautiful day, we can see the actual draw distance for the game. Enemies pop in pretty close to James, but the areas that are loaded in are actually surprisingly far away. What's strange about this is that in the unmodded game, the fog is thick and so close to James, you never even see the buildings that are actually loaded in. Rendering most of the map like this at once is not only pointless, because it takes a significant chunk of performance straight out of your game for no reason at all, but it's also ironic because the fog existed in the first few Silent Hill games for this exact reason. The PlayStation 1 didn't have the power to load distant areas, and to hide the hardware shortcomings, Team Silent slapped a bunch of fog onto the game, which fortunately gave it a more ominous tone, but conveniently improved performance as well. The fog in the Silent Hill 2 remake is still present to provide a bleak tone for the game's visuals, but the developers aren't utilizing it to its full potential. Some games make distant buildings look horrendous to save performance instead of just outright making them disappear, and the Silent Hill 2 remake doesn't even do that. Fine details still appear on the distant objects, but we never would have even seen it in the unmodded version because of the fog. Sure, you could say DLSS and frame generation are excellent solutions for gamers to not not spend a fortune on a new card to run these games. But as we can see from the recommended specs, there are also solutions for developers to not make basic fixes for their games because they're thinking, well, why would we make our game run good when DLSS can do it for us? The RTX 4090 can't even play Silent Hill 2 at 4K, which is the industry's current mainstream resolution, at 60 frames per second. That is not only crazy, but it's unacceptable when it's clear that there are obvious fixes that will make the game in question run better without using upscaling. But despite all the graphical issues, it still should have won something at the Game Awards, goddammit.
And Silent Hill 2. And the Game Award for audio design goes to
Silent Hill 2, right? Come on.
Senua's Saga, Hellblade 2.
The PlayStation 5 Pro, which is the best console on the market for gaming, and over $1,000 in Canada if you want the disc attachment, uses its own AI upscaling technology known as PSSR, or PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution. I remember when the PlayStation 5 was revealed back in 2020, they were preaching that this is a huge step for gaming because developers don't have as many graphical limitations anymore to how they want their game to look. Because of the convenience of power, developers are now making more limitations because of these short-term solutions like upscaling and frame generation to optimize their game for them. PSSR is not good for the future of console gaming. Think about it. Consoles don't allow for advanced graphical customization. On PC, you can select the texture quality, draw distance, shader quality, reflections, and on console, you can choose between performance or quality. In-depth graphics customization will never be a thing on consoles because they're made with the intention to be convenient. So now that we have PSSR, what's stopping these companies from making an unoptimized video game, using PSSR to make it run a stable 30 FPS, and then calling that the quality setting? This, right now, when some games can't even play 60 FPS at 4K on the fattest GPU on the market, is not good, and will only give future developers an incentive to use shortcuts while making the game's visuals. Ray tracing. 2 words that's been crammed into every gaming tech presentation ever since 2018. So here's a quick explanation of what ray tracing actually is. Ray tracing is a graphics technique that simulates how light behaves in the real world to create photorealistic frames. Prior to ray tracing's explosive entrance into the industry in 2018, developers would have to make their own lighting techniques in the game to simulate as accurately as possible how the light and reflections would behave. The thing about ray tracing is that in most modern games, you won't even notice a difference. Most of the awe you'll get from a game that's ray traced is the placebo effect whispering in your ear that the game looks way better. This is Cyberpunk with ray tracing on max, and this is Cyberpunk with ray tracing off. As you can see, there is a graphical upgrade with ray tracing, but more importantly, there's a huge dent in performance. Ray tracing has actually existed for a very long time though. The initial idea for it was thought up in 1968, and Pixar started using it in their animated films, beginning its reign in A Bug's Life from 1999. Granted, they only used it for like 2 shots, but regardless, they did use ray tracing. That's why 3D animated movies from the early 2000s still look better than modern day stylized games. Now that we have the technology to implement ray tracing in video games though, it's a pro and a con. In some games that don't have detailed casting effects like Minecraft, ray tracing is an enormous upgrade. But in games like Cyberpunk, it looks great in some scenes, but most of the time you probably won't even notice it. It's true that ray tracing is an option. You don't have to enable it, but the support of this new expensive technology means the downfall of an old but gold method of creating reflection. I'm going to use Half-Life 2 for this example. In Half-Life 2, Valve used planar reflections to create convincing looking water. While this can be expensive to performance if used on a large face of water like an ocean for example, it's great for something small like a puddle. Now you guys may be saying, Justin, don't be a dingus, you dingus! Technology needs to evolve over time. Otherwise we'll be stuck in the same place forever. And I 100% agree with you, you're not wrong. I just think that a lot of modern developers are putting all of their chips into ray tracing, even though most modern GPUs still struggle to run games with ray tracing on. In Star Wars Outlaws, for example, there's no option to turn ray tracing off. You can only lower and enhance the quality. All I'm saying is that while I would like to get to the point where every game automatically has ray tracing on, I just feel like most gamers aren't there yet, since a lot of people still use GTX 1080s, RTX 2080s, and whatever the AMD alternatives are. are, I don't really know. So why limit your audience? There should absolutely be ray tracing options, but I think that developers should still put a lot of effort into optimizing their games for when ray tracing is off, so it still looks good and not muggy everywhere. Most people don't have the money to sink into a brand spanking new 4090 that can actually utilize ray tracing well. So the rest of the gamers, including console gamers, are forced to be stuck with these subpar water effects and reflections because the developers think that they can just glaze over it as fast as possible since there's an easy, quick solution, and that's to let ray tracing do the work for them. I love ray tracing. I love shadow quality, a lot of reflective surfaces, but let's be real, this is too much for what we can handle right now. We can barely even run 4K open world games on the newest cards, so why are we building video games for ray tracing? That is insanity. And again, if ray tracing is an option, that's great. All I'm saying is the game should still look good for the people that don't want to have it enabled. Developers need to optimize their graphics to where the gamers are at, and not 100% to where the newest hardware is. Of course, optimize it so the games look as good as possible on that hardware, but don't make it impossible for everybody else, because that's just a lose-lose for everybody involved. Now, these new games, Stalker 2, Remnant 2, Silent Hill 2, The Witcher 4, all have something in common, and it's that they're all made in the Unreal Engine. Unreal Engine 5, to be specific. When Unreal Engine 5 was announced, people thought it would be a huge leap for developers since it would handle a lot of the fine graphical details, taking the work off of the programmers. The flaw with UE5 is that the graphics are incredible, but they're also expensive and unoptimized. Most of these Unreal Engine 5 games suffer the same issues, and that's not only bad performance, but very blatant ghosting. Ghosting is when a frame lingers for a bit, even after it moves on. There's also some pretty clear flickering problems and the hardcore push for temporal anti-aliasing. Anti-aliasing is a graphics technology that's been around for a while, to be fair, which removes the jagged edges on objects. With it off, the game is completely raw. Each pixel is exactly where it needs to be at the cost of everything looking sharp. What anti-aliasing does is it slightly blurs the image by softening the edges on objects and makes it appear less like a video game and more like a picture. TAA is used pretty much everywhere now in modern gaming, and if you stand still, it looks pretty good, but if you move, it looks blurry and horrendous. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a great example for a game that's made with the idea that TAA will be enabled. The game without it looks weird, and with it on, looks blurry. It's clear that the developers didn't take the time to optimize the game without it, and instead decided to really push for TAA. But the problem is that TAA in Red Dead Redemption 2 isn't completely optimized either, and just ruins the image when the game is moving, which is, you know, most of the game. Stalker 2, an Unreal Engine 5 game, is probably the perfect example of a game that relies on TAA to look good. And it's clear that the game was made with TAA in mind, because the trees are dithered without it on. So basically, if you want to play a modern video game, you either get sharp, unrealistic, and untouched graphics, or turn anti-aliasing on and get a main dish of blurry game with a side of ghosting. Anti-aliasing was not always this much of an issue though. Let's look at Skyrim. With anti-aliasing off, the game looks sharp, sure, but it still looks great. While Red Dead Redemption 2 with anti-aliasing off looks sharp and weird. And like the developers never even wanted it to be an option. It's another strange time for gaming. In 2008, we had the notorious piss filter trend, where every game had a brown and yellow color scheme. In 2018, every game had to have a battle royale mode, and in 2024, every game is made in Unreal Engine 5, and nothing runs as well as it should. To prevent this from happening, developers need to slow down and take the time to remove the unnecessary clutter that claps performance. They need to think, well, how can we make this reflection look good without ray tracing? And they need to consider the broad audience of gamers instead of what the loaded game journalists who can actually run the game at max settings will say about it.
What the hell?
But most importantly, what do you guys think about all this? How can developers fix this modern issue in gaming? Make sure to let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll check them out as soon as I possibly can. As always, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to watch this video, and make sure to have a good one. Also, I wrote a song about this. I hate TAA, choppy gameplay. For the price I pay, I would think that most the shit I buy would run okay. I can't trace no rays. Back in the day, if this is AAA, then there's something that I gotta say. What happened to my frames? What happened to my frames? When all of these games still look the same, and I know that my PC isn't to blame. Oh no, what happened to my frames? What happened to my frames? When all of these games still look the same, and I know that my PC isn't to blame. Oh no, it isn't to blame.
Tell me that this will last forever. What? Come on, don't say that. You're not old. Ryzen 5 3600, 16 gigabytes of DDR4 RAM, and your graphics card is only 10 numbers under the best one on the market right now. The RTX 2080.
What's that clunky ass charger for? Baby, that's for my phone. Oh, come on, what are you looking at now? Oh! Baby, it's not what it looks like. Maybe she does have the better graphics card and CPU, but come on, you're the fatter one. Don't be like that. Baby, please talk to me. It doesn't have to be like this.
Who are you?
There are dozens of games
a really bad time. Let me just say that. He has been having an extremely bad time.
It's safe to say one of the most disliked live streamers in the world just realized he destroyed his life chasing internet attention in South Korea, as things have somehow got...
I don't think that's true, because that would imply that he's capable of self-reflection, which is usually something that people above an 80 IQ have the ability to do. And so it's like the idea, like, could a Game Boy run The Witcher 3? It just doesn't, it's just not going to happen, right? I can't believe it. Yeah, there's no way it could do that.
And even worse for Johnny Somali out there, because not only has he been slapped with more charges, but one of these new charges, they come with a mandatory prison sentence of at least 3 years if convicted.
Damn.
And considering South Korea has about a 99% conviction rate, it's not like you really need to be a legal expert to see where all of this is going. But what makes all of this even dumber is the fact that Johnny, just like everything else, live streamed him doing everything. Just like how he live streamed himself prank calling the police for $5, how he live streamed himself...
$5? What a cheap bitch. Oh my God.
Harassing construction workers, stalking other streamers, showing up late to his own trial after drunkenly insulting the judge and prosecutors.
This is also the other stream where he just, the end of this stream was him throwing up on the floor and then everybody getting mad at him.
Also live, in his new defense, he's apparently trying to pull the I'm bipolar card to avoid jail time. Good luck.
I think that the real card he should play is that he does not have the mental capacity to understand that what he's doing is wrong. I don't like when I see a person with a fully automatic submachine gun and they got it aimed at their foot and they've got their finger on the trigger holding it down, just shooting themselves over and over and over and over and over again. I think to myself, there's no way this is real. Like, there's got to be something wrong here. Yes, I mean, insanity. Yes, yeah, you've got to play the insanity card.
With that, especially because he's already pleaded guilty to 3 charges in the exact same case. So today we're diving into how Johnny somehow managed to stack 5 criminal charges in just a few months, all of which could send him to prison for years, all for the attention of 20 teenagers online. But on top of that,
I don't know if it's that many.
We're also talking about a new investigation which could lead to another decade in prison for him. So it's safe to say things.
And this is, again, look at that, child harassment. Oh boy.
For him, so it's safe to say things are just not going his way over there. And speaking of doing stupid stuff live, he also leaked a conversation between his pretend lawyer and his real lawyer live. So it's safe to say things are becoming more...
Why does he have a pretend lawyer? Why? What do you have? What? What the hell?
More and more telling of how screwed he really is. And this whole nonchalant act is in fact nothing more than just an act that's going to backfire on him massively. So let's get into this disaster. So as of right now, I saw him pleading guilty to 3 charges last time I traveled out to South Korea. This was for disruption of business revolving around the incident at 7-Eleven in Mapo that we actually went.
In my opinion, this is the, when we're talking about El Salvador, you know it. I know it. Everybody knows it.
And Mapo that we actually went to in my video. Then there were the 2 Minor Crimes Act violations, which are essentially misdemeanors here in the US. One for twerking on people and blasting music on the subway, and one for shoving a rotten fish in people's faces and blasting music on a public bus. And since then...
So, wait a minute. This is like one of those NPCs in a video game. So you have this random idiot with a camera holding a dead fish, and he's trying to run at people and annoy them, and he doesn't speak the language. Like, this is like something out of a cartoon. Really, like, there are crackheads with more composure than this. He needs to just plead insanity. Yakuza side mission? Yes.
he's been hit with even more charges. His deepfake charge, which carries a minimum of 3 years in prison if convicted.
Yep.
Then there's another obstruction of business charge involving Latte World. And then on top of that, to make things even worse for the dude, there's a new investigation that can give him an additional 10.5 years in prison if they end up going through and charging him with this. And that investigation is for child harassment. And this revolves an incident of him spamming horrific slurs at kids in Korean while at Lotte World. Lotte World, if you didn't know, is a kids theme park that has similarities to Disney.
This is weird. Who does this? Who does this? Is weird.
Disneyland and a kids-oriented version of Six Flags. Because in this clip, he walks around with that.
So he's going into the starter zone and he's trying to harass people and PvP them? That's not even fair. In any game, you would get banned for this. This is normal. Yeah, he's smurfing. And you know what? He's probably still going to get outmaneuvered by, you know, there's like some 8-year-old. He's probably still going to end up the losing end.
Infamous Bluetooth speaker that's gotten him in so much trouble in Japan, and he lets people donate to use him as a proxy to harass kids in the worst way possible. And while he doesn't understand Korean,
keep in mind that this is the same person that was spamming Hiroshima, Nagasaki in Korean because it would make them mad because then they got bombed in World War II. Like this is the galaxy brain at work. Okay. No, in Japan? No, he did it in Korea too. Yeah, no.
Wouldn't be able to understand what the text-to-speech was saying. At the end of the day, it's still on him. He's allowed himself to be this vessel for these completely unacceptable interactions. The last thing you want as a parent is, you know, taking your kids to some theme park for them to be harassed through some dude's speaker as he's filming and live streaming your kid's reaction for the entire internet.
He plays sexually harassing TTS targeted at children. What the hell is going on? This is so weird. Just put this guy in jail. Like, what are we doing? Send him to
that should not be accepted, and that's why it's so important for these streamers to be extremely careful with how they use the text-to-speech feature in public, as they're the ones.
Here's how you should use the text-to-speech. Here's how you should use the text-to-speech feature in public. You don't. I'm at the point now where, like, unless I was in a private place, I would never use text-to-speech in a public place. And, like, the problem also is, like, for me, like, I don't even live stream IRL at all anymore. Because, like, once you reach, like, a certain viewer size, it becomes a disruption for everywhere you go. Like, I might meme a lot about things, but, like, I don't want to go to, like, a Wendy's and then have the employees get harassed there. Like, I don't want to do that.
Responsible for whatever comes out of the speaker that's on their backpack. But in addition to his public defendant, which is essentially the lawyer he's been using up until now, Johnny has now gone out and got himself a real lawyer. Or, well, it seems like his friend Hank has done so for him. And this is what Legal Mindset and some other Korean legal analysts have said about his new lawyer.
He has two real lawyers, we're not counting Hank. First is a public defender in the Western District. That is a free attorney that is provided in the Western District where he has an active case. He also has a paid attorney in the Eastern District. Now, the Eastern District charges, as we're going to see, are largely being merged into the Western District. So this paid lawyer is unregistered in the West. So this paid lawyer is unaware of the exact proceedings and what's going on in the Western District. So
he hired a lawyer that doesn't know the case? I immediately believe that. You know what? That's probably exactly what happened.
Really has no idea about what's going on unless he contacts certain people or does extra effort. And it appears that he is kind of being lazy with his proceedings. Also, people that were in the know and some legal professionals and others that analyze this, as well as people that looked at
this person has less of a self-preservation mechanism than Looney Tunes cartoons. Like, you've got the Roadrunner and like fucking Yosemite Sam, Tasmanian Devil, Tom from Tom and Jerry has more of fucking like of a self-preservation mechanism than this. Yeah, Wile E. Coyote. Yeah, exactly.
This lawyer, it appears he's kind of what you might call in the U.S. a strip mall lawyer. He's got a very heavy Korean, heavy specific regional accent, which is very hard to understand. He also seems to be very inexperienced with criminal procedure because he doesn't understand the concept of merging cases.
So he hasn't cooperated throughout his entire case, and he's only mocked the judge and prosecutors every step of the way. And his new
What could go wrong?
Hail Mary is to hire a strip mall lawyer. Bro has a Korean Saul Goodman at his service. I mean, the train wreck just somehow keeps on.
No, because Saul Goodman got people out. That's the difference. Is like, so Saul Goodman at the end of the day would bring home the bacon. Like, he was a bit of a clown, but he would bring home. Saul was good, yeah.
Wrecking. But again, somehow it all gets worse, because we also found out that the prosecutor trying to bring Johnny to justice is a top 10 prosecutor in all of Korea. And his new attorney...
Oh, God. Bro, he's going up against an S-rank hunter. He not even E-rank. He gone. Yeah, you got the boss music playing.
Over there also stated that the law enforcement over there is very hard to work with for him due to Johnny's behavior throughout the whole trial. Then to make things even worse, Johnny's lawyer met with the prosecutor to beg them to drop the deepfake charges, but it was too late.
Ramsey, as lawyer, tried to meet with her.
What a
tried to meet with this
surprise.
prosecutor to beg her to drop with the deepfake case, to beg her to drop it. And as we're going to see with the deepfake case, the hilarious thing is by the time he met with her, it was already too late.
Oh.
The charge had already been indicted. They'd already moved on. They've already processed this. So it was too late to even do that meeting. But they were trying to beg her to drop it because they thought she could drop it. But she'd already indicted and it had already been moved over to the Western District.
That charge alone could be 10 years in prison for Johnny. So for
my
the sake of his
God.
own freedom, it's really about time he starts apologizing for real and changes his ways. But unfortunately for Johnny, I feel like that is just way too late for him now, as Legal Mindset explains the time
Yeah, he's been got, bro. Like, he's done.
line of the deepfake charges here.
On February 18th, referred the deepfake case to the prosecutor, which means at that point, it's looking pretty solid. And we had that based on the information that Ramsey flashed across the screen. He flashed across a paper which revealed that this was already sent to the prosecutor.
Right.
And I called it out at the time and I said, he's probably screwed on this because this is going to go on to court. If something is sent to the prosecutor, it is highly likely you're going to get an indictment. Well, on March 7th, he leaked that, right? And then on the 25th, the Eastern prosecutor indicted Ramsey. On the 27th, that indictment moved from the East to the West. The West is where his current case is. They are trying to consolidate everything in that Western district because it's already going, it's already pending, and they want to bring everything over to there so they handle it all in one trial rather than breaking it up into multiple trials. So on that day, I knew immediately, and I informed everybody on the 27th. Because of that, Ramsey and Hank were panicking, and they were talking about that with their lawyer. And that lawyer had no idea. I actually predicted that on my stream. I said, his lawyer might not even know because the lawyer is not registered in the West. He's only registered in the East. So he actually wasn't accessing the right court records that were in the Western District.
I'm building a team.
So at that meeting, he actually said, oh, you're not indicted for this. Oh, you're not indicted yet. He was.
So again, he's played his cards in the worst way possible, then put his freedom in the hands of a lawyer who isn't even registered in the correct district for him to properly help him. Without a doubt, Johnny or Ramsey deserves a permanent spot in the Hall of Fame of Influencer Morons for his entire trip to Korea. The dude has essentially turned himself into an international laughingstock for nothing. Then he's also trusting this new lawyer.
No, he probably got $20
for advice, and clearly he's given him a false sense of security.
The lawyer said it's unlikely since you're American, which actually revealed the
since you're American. You know what? I bet that's exactly what the lawyer said. Yeah, it's about right.
Experience and ignorance of this lawyer. Clear example, there was an American that went to jail, that was sentenced to 1 year in jail, prison
That's
time,
a lot.
for a single crime, and this was actually predating deepfakes. This was just one cybercrime and an obstruction of business. So remember, Ramsey has at least 2 obstruction of business charges already on the docket, 2 Minor Crimes Act, and a deepfake. So Ramsey has over double the amount of charges, and that person, that defendant, was completely cooperative with the judge in the court.
Yeah, and Johnny's been anything but that. And unfortunately for Johnny, he outed Hank's and his own lawyer's incompetence himself. As again, he keeps on streaming from his lawyer's office, and by doing so,
he's streaming from his lawyer's office who doesn't understand the case, can't speak English, and is trying to pull the case from a district that it's not. This is unbelievable. This is like a bunch of monkeys trying to put out a house fire with gasoline. Legit 70 IQ, yes. How does this happen? Oh my god. How did we get here? Well, it's people like this usually would have probably gotten filtered out by like the first lion that they see. But like now that you don't have any lions around, you just have these people live streaming. That's the issue. That's the problem. Yeah, we removed natural selection, so now these people have to select themselves.
He keeps leaking information about his trial without even realizing it as it's being said in Korean. While Johnny doesn't understand Korean, many others do, including translators that help creators cover the story.
Sure.
So this is the lawyer speaking.
What are you asking? Don't try to figure it out, please. Please don't try to figure this out yourself. The last thing that we need you to do.
So what's happening here, guys, is that Hank is trying to be the lawyer, and the lawyer is having to reprimand and say, hey, Hank, like, let me talk first. Stop trying to explain, right? Stop trying to explain. And once again, this is an issue where Johnny didn't understand the Korean, so he just streamed it. But it just shows how incompetent Hank is, and how even a lawyer who he's paying money to is saying, dude, shut up. Like, let me talk.
Why is he live streaming this in general? And Hank is the one who's been telling Johnny that everything was
like an episode of Ed, Ed and Eddie? Yes. It's like, we're going to make $1 million by selling Jawbreakers. Well, how are we going to do it? We're going to sell each one for $1 million. And we're going to try to sell them to homeless people because they're bad with money. Yeah, it's just
going to be fine. And then, of course, they messed up and didn't mute again.
This is the superintendent of the Women's and Juvenile Division at Songpa Police Station. Pay attention to that title, superintendent. Okay? The next section, we're going to talk about police and prosecution. This is wild. Also, the section on women and juvenile crimes. The crimes that he's charged with are against women and children. They're saying we're referring to...
How do you fuck up this bad? This is a crazy level of fucking up. It's impressive.
Case number. That means he was indicted.
Bro thought he hired Ed, but he came out that he hired Plank. No, it's like... It's basically like Ed, like the dumb one, hiring Plank. And then Plank's the smarter one. And they've come up with the idea that maybe if we go to the court case and we stand perfectly still, they won't be able to see me and we can leave. That's what it is.
Wait, that's you. Just me. Wait.
Yeah, I mean, that's an uh-oh face from Hank right there. And part of me kind of wants to feel for him as he's been guilted into like trying his best to defend his friend who's so stupid he would rather live stream his legal counseling than have a better chance at having his freedom back. It's like he doesn't care his own freedom's on the line. It's just so stupid. It's baffling at this point.
Yeah,
but
he doesn't
moving on,
understand.
another clip came out of him threatening to SA the female police officers that were at the
Why would you do that? Why would you say, why?
station after getting arrested for his underwear stunt.
I've been to this police station 20 times. It's the first time they can put me in cuffs. I've been to this police station 20 different times.
But like, they put you. Where do they think you're gonna go? You're like, why are you in cuffs? That doesn't make any sense.
I don't know.
What do you guys think his IQ is? I think do I need my hands or can I do it with just my hands or I need my feet too? It's 74. I think 74.
I don't care. The Texans, they're lucky. I don't.
Dude is really.
Wait, what?
The Texans, they're lucky. I don't.
Dude is really.
Why would you say that? You idiot! Why would you say this?
Going for the maximum sentence here. He just can't shut up and act right because he has to continuously make everything worse for himself over and over again. And there is nothing that's going to stop him from doing so, no matter how much jail time he's facing. Like, he's just making it so clear to the South Korean judge and prosecutors that if they want to stop this behavior, they're going to have to force him to do so.
Yeah.
He knows all of this is going to be viewed by them, but still, for some reason, claims that he has no regrets whatsoever.
So my question is basically to Johnny. What I would like to know is if he has any regrets for what he has been doing over the past few years, especially what's been going on in South Korea.
Zero regrets, zero remorse.
There is no way. Again, he's just sending these.
Oh man, what an idiot. No regrets. Yep.
Messages to the prosecutor and judge over and over again, it seems. How stupid is it possible to be?
You haven't watched your own videos with all the other things that you've done over the couple of years. You haven't seen anything. You haven't watched anything.
No, whenever I see clips of it, I laugh my ass off. It's funny.
Then on top of that, he also wanted to show up to his next court date wearing the new Kanye gown.
What do you think about?
So he wants to show up in a KKK outfit.
About the cake outfit at the court. Is that too crazy? The one. The same one kind of had.
Bro, I know.
This is it's really impressive. Like, he's a complete psychopath. He needs to be in a padded room. Well, the thing is that I don't even know if he's a psych. I think that, like, in order for somebody to be a psychopath, they have to at least have a degree of understanding of what they're doing. Like, a dog isn't a psychopath, right? I don't think that he even knows what's going on.
It's a wonderful idea, but you won't even have a platform. You'll just get automatic banned.
No, so now I'm my Instagram deleted again. You're saying
it's a wonderful idea. I'm not gonna lie. But you can't do that and have a platform.
I really want to do the KK shit, but I know
it's a good idea, but why isn't there anybody else doing the stunt? Because
you're right. There's no one else in the world is doing that. You're right. I haven't seen anybody but Kanye do that.
But that's good. No, because like you see how, and like the guys that he's talking to are at least kind of smart because they understand that they can't reason with him with logic. Like, why would you want to use, like, because, I mean, if you want to show up to your court case wearing a KKK outfit, logic clearly isn't going to work here, right? So they're like, okay, yeah, but why do you think nobody else has done that, though? And then now he's thinking, bro, exactly. I'm the first person that came up with this. I'm the smartest person here. I'm a trendsetter. Yeah, he took it the wrong way. That's why he should do it.
So what could I do at the court? I'm gonna have reporters talking to me at the court like in 2 days. Like
he thinks he's a celebrity.
Is coming. The last time I flipped them off and I said I love North Korea.
Man, that's crazy. That's yeah.
I swear to God, I did.
It seems like his own personal Super Bowl seems to be being the biggest idiot possible and going for the most amount of time in Korean prison. But what he doesn't realize is once he's in prison for a year, people will forget about him. And then if he's in prison for like 5 years, almost everyone would have forgotten about him then. And speaking of prison time, the newest investigation might be the worst one for him yet, as he's now facing an additional 10 years in prison if they go forward with this charge. And again, because he live streamed himself doing it, it's not like they have to gather evidence. It's really just if the prosecutor wants to hit him with it or not. But as of right now,
it's like the Better Call Saul, the pilot episode. Just roll the tape. Just roll the tape. There it is. All right. That settles it.
Johnny hasn't responded to this new investigation, and his new trial is delayed yet again. So I'm sure Hank is worrying, because that means that Hank will have to foot the bill for Johnny for even longer until he's inevitably arrested. But that's the most recent update for the Johnny Smalley case. I know a lot of you guys have been asking me for one, but we have so many more crazy stories coming out this week. Also, shout out Legal Mindset for his great coverage of all this. I'll be linking his channel in the description down below. So make sure to subscribe if you're new here, and also I'll see you in the next video. Peace.
Once again, so once he gets out of prison in 5 years, his viewers will be 15 years old and they'll have moved on. That's a really good point. Yeah, at that point, yeah. Well, would it be an act of war if he was airdropped into North Korea? No. I think it would be even better. Okay, so like, I think it should go even farther. I think that if they send him to North Korea, I would be worried about him becoming a celebrity in North Korea. Like, I think that there's a chance that, you know, like Dennis Rodman, right? Like, he could become really popular in North Korea because of how much he hates South Korea. So, like, because that would be, by the way, that would be the most entertaining outcome, is if he gets sent to North Korea and it turns out that Kim Jong-un likes him. That would be the funniest, like Simple Jack. Yeah, basically like Simple Jack. Exactly. North Korea uses them. Yeah, it's amazing. Here, I'll link you guys the video. Give it a like. This is fucking hilarious, man. We got the white version here in the Philippines. Yeah, Vitali. He realized he destroyed his life. No, he didn't. He doesn't get it. He won't realize it until it's too late. I think that even whenever he's in jail, he's going to think that somehow, like, it's like a good thing that he's in jail, or like everybody's talking about him or thinking about him. Like, I think that there's probably going to be some kind of dumb fucking shit going on with him being in jail, and it's going to be even dumber than you might imagine, man. Yeah, the denial is strong. Yeah, it is. It's really strong. I didn't expect that at all. Yeah, and bro, he's going to be he's carrying a bar of soap around, talking to it, thinking that he's streaming. Well, I don't know if he'd really want to carry that around. But anyway, it's just, it's crazy how many of these guys just totally one-shot their entire life.
Why is it that Bethesda games have progressively gotten worse? And while it's a subjective question, it's not entirely incorrect. We'll be looking into that along with diving into Starfield more specifically, uncovering its many flaws, and taking a look at the entire main story, to figure out what the intention of the game was, and what we actually ended up with. Then, finally, looking to the future of Bethesda. Generally speaking, games used to be more difficult, beginning with arcade games having to be harder to keep players inserting coins. And this philosophy carried over to consoles, but in a different way. Games used to be extremely short due to memory limitations. However, that time could be increased artificially, with much more difficult enemies to deal with, set save locations and limited lives and so on, requiring you to take your time and think, doing the same sections of games repeatedly, turning that 2 hours into 50 even. But developers also had more freedom to innovate within those limitations. As technology advanced and the gaming industry grew, so did the audience. Priorities were placed on accessibility and making them more approachable to the largest possible demographics. And as a result, over time, games have become more streamlined by including guided tutorials, objective markers, simplified mechanics and interfaces. While this made gaming more welcoming to newcomers, it came at the cost of complexity and depth. It is very possible to have both, of course, but for the majority of AAA titles, the focus has been placed on the side of capturing the largest market. Looking at Bethesda specifically, let's start with Daggerfall, one of the earliest Elder Scrolls titles. With a ridiculous amount of skills to choose from and the ability to set your own advantages and disadvantages that change how you interact with the game, and so much variety you're free to choose what you want to do. If you don't like one aspect of the game, do another. You're not locked into one way of playing. Its map size is approximately 161,600 kilometers. That's roughly around the size of the United Kingdom. Daggerfall is more akin to a life simulator in terms of role-playing elements and size. Morrowind opts for a fully handcrafted, rich and detailed, but much smaller world, filled with unique locations. It won't hold your hand in the slightest. You had to invest. You had to learn the culture of the land you were in, the public transport routes, because there was no real fast travel. You need to read your journal to find directions to quest locations. You had to pay attention. Combat-wise, in the beginning, you are useless, to the point you may even die to the first rat you face on your journey. But as you progress through the game, you will become a god. With Oblivion, we get the introduction of Radiant AI, a system that allows NPCs to have unique interactions and behaviors, to dynamically react and interact within the world. Having different NPCs have different goals, like eat in this location at 5 PM or travel to the next town over and stay with a friend, aided tremendously in what Todd Howard described as an organic feel. Each of these games innovated in different ways, but also removed elements of the prior titles. One of the mechanics that is present in Daggerfall, Morrowind, and Oblivion is spellmaking, for example. The ability to customize and tailor spells to your liking. And they could be incredibly broken if you wanted. You could fly or jump across the map, become permanently invisible, create a destruction spell that looked like it could level a small village. Skyrim, on the other hand, does away with this, along with many other things, but is far more accessible than previous titles. Skyrim is simplified, but within that simplification comes a mass appeal and a much more immersive, vibrant world. Fallout 4 follows a similar route in comparison to Fallout 3. It does away with skills and has instead rolled them into perks. So instead of the ability to, for example, specialize in a more specific playstyle, you're limited just by picking perks. and removing all perk and skill-specific dialogue checks, thus removing several RPG elements. The largest and most controversial change in Fallout 4 is the addition of a voiced protagonist. Whilst vastly increasing accessibility and likely one of the reasons why it's the most popular Fallout game to date, limited many factors of what constitutes a Bethesda game. Having a voiced protagonist limits you in how you can view yourself. The inflections are set in stone, with no nuance to how you perceive your character would say things. You remove content by simply having a voice. The voice actor is stuck with the background, personality, and morality the game has set. You're limited on how much can be said and in the variety of ways they can be delivered, which is not an issue if you have the writing talent to back it up. A lot of the time you'll choose one dialogue option just for your character to say something completely different. The trade-off, however, is smoother combat, the addition of settlement building, improved crafting, the ability to sprint, and of course having a voice. And you might like these changes, you might even love the settlement building and voice to the point you won't touch the previous Fallout titles. And that's why this is so divisive, because your love or hate of Bethesda games is more than likely largely based on your own entry point. Say you began with Fallout 3, the first time you left Vault 101, the natural sunlight blinding you, your eyes gradually acclimating, revealing this vast wasteland for you to explore. That experience sticks with you. Or in Starfield, the first time you landed on a planet, roaming its surface, that first realization hitting you like a wave, that there is nothing for you to do. Sorry, yeah, we'll save that for later. So, my introduction to Bethesda Studios was the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion on the Xbox 360. The world felt alive. Exiting the sewers for the first time is etched in my mind forever. The side quests and exploration are unrivaled to me. The bugs, the goofiness, and the fact that only 10 voice actors voiced over 900 characters was and still is charming to me. It's the one game my mum sat down and enjoyed watching me play. All of these things are reasons why Oblivion has a special place in my heart. Could I play Daggerfall? Maybe, but the scale and the idea of it being mostly procedurally generated doesn't particularly hold my attention. Could I play Morrowind? Within the first 10 minutes die to a rat because I messed up my stat investment? Return to where I died to witness a wizard screaming and falling from the sky. Loot him for some interesting scrolls. Curiously, test out the scrolls to suddenly leap into the sky and fall to my death. Spend time reading the interesting lore. Lose myself in a hand-drawn and fascinatingly unique alien-looking world. I could, and have, but it's definitely a different mindset in comparison to the comfort and relaxation I feel with Oblivion or Skyrim. But then I don't like Skyrim as much for its simplifications. The point is, if you started with Skyrim, more than likely that's your favorite Elder Scrolls game. If you started with Morrowind, you might swear by Morrowind and everything else is garbage. Or you might have grown to find comfort in the later titles. It could be considered synonymous with nostalgia, but it's deeper than re-experiencing or looking back on something you cherish, and then basing future experiences with that standard. We all have different definitions of what worse is or what a Bethesda game means to us. One thing, however, that is indisputable is that each new installment has less depth. So let's take a look at Starfield. While this is a new IP, This is in the same vein as the Elder Scrolls and Fallout series, just a different coat of paint. Fantasy, post-apocalyptic sci-fi, and finally sci-fi. Completing the trifecta. That's really the only difference. The engine that runs this is almost exactly the same, so we're bound to draw comparisons, and I certainly will be.
You bet your ass it's your problem.
You kidding me? Way to make a mess in front of my new roof.
In Starfield, there will be a moment that completely flicks a switch in your brain that allows you to see it for what it really is. It could be as simple as going through 5 loading screens within 50 seconds, or it could be returning from a side quest to then witness your quest giver levitating into the ceiling.
There you are. You were gone for quite a while, love.
Or you're faced with a quest chain that only has nonsensical outcomes, when very clearly in your brain there is only one outcome that should really be a possibility. The purpose of video games, more specifically this genre, is to sell to you that the world you've been transported into is real. That you have your own autonomy in this virtual world, that your choices matter, that your exploration and intrigue will be compensated, that the more you put time and effort into investing in this universe, the more rich and more fulfilling your experience will be. And while previous titles hold many of the same issues, they were bugs within the system, byproducts of innovative game design due to the variety of options given to the player, along with technical limitations and taking risks. They had character, there was a sense of passion. Technology has evolved, so why have we backpedaled so far to the point that Starfield is somehow seemingly the most realistic yet least immersive of any previous Bethesda game? Starfield is stagnant. Bethesda is stagnating. Every single implementation of prior mechanics is a downgrade in some shape or form of previous titles, and each new mechanic is constrained in terms of depth. Melee weapons have less thought put into them than ever before. There are less than a handful of weapons, and I do mean that literally. The melee upgradable skills are nothing but damage boosts. You have a 3-hit combo and a power attack. That's it. There are no directional attacks that offer different ranges or effects. Daggerfall had directional attacks. Daggerfall was 30 years ago. You could argue that, technology has advanced. A fire axe won't do anything to these futuristic spacesuits, while these laser beams will indiscriminately pierce anything. But you can also argue that maybe there are some far more tanky suits, requiring strength stats to wear that mitigate lasers, with weapons that incorporate this new technology and vaporize anything in its path. Or a fist weapon utilizing space hydraulics to crush anything. It's as if melee combat was an afterthought, thrown in lazily to appease those unsure why it's present in all previous games but this one. Lockpicking is now a far more tedious minigame, yet finding picks is harder than it's ever been. The rewards are almost non-existent. The amount of time you spend, a minute picking a lock, to be rewarded with maybe a half-eaten sandwich is impressive. So eventually you'll get bored of even doing that, risking the possibility of maybe for once getting some good loot, just because eventually it is that boring. The faction quests are bland, which is unfortunate because some of them show promise in the beginning, just to fall off a cliff halfway through. Then we have the stealth system, somehow worse than the already terrible stealth systems in every other game. You have people noticing you from 2 rooms away or 2 floors down. Companions that seem to completely disregard the need for subtlety, running all over the place, alerting everything, resulting in guards teleporting through walls to catch you when you were hidden.
I'm holding you for trespassing.
What's most confusing is there is a faction in this game based around corporate espionage, rewarding you for the more stealthy and charismatic choices. Bethesda has gone through many evolutions of how to do persuasion. Oblivion had a wheel minigame you'd play, picking options based on the most positive facial expressions. Fallout 3 went with RNG and raising your odds with charisma and speech skills. There were dialogue options based on unique perks you chose and your special skills, along with your current moral standing. Skyrim is really just for barter prices and a few quests, I think. Fallout 4 is entirely based on a singular charisma stat and is RNG based. And somehow, Starfield has the worst system of them all. For 2 reasons. Generally, the writing is just bad, but the main offender here is it's selling you on a lie. It looks intricate. You're given what feels like contextual lines color-coded based on success rate, tailored towards your current situation, who you're speaking to and their personality and temperament. The riskier the choice, the more points gained. In terms of color-coded risk, this is true, but in terms of tailoring your words to who you're speaking to, that's not actually real. What's going on is you're pulling from a library of generic lines shared with every other NPC in the game that can be persuaded, with a few unique lines more fitting to the situation you're in and the person you're speaking to. But even if these unique lines are tailored and your knowledge of who you're speaking to allows you to pick what you deem to be the most fitting choice, that invisible percentage isn't changing. There is no correlation between the written text changing any probabilities. For example, you can attempt to persuade a guard to give you his security card, and every single speech option is just pulled from the "give me this item" generic lines folder. The argument is not that it's RNG or anything, it's that the approach taken is to fake depth. These interactions aren't unique at all. Most role-playing games tailor dialogue choices, backed up with good writing. Then you can throw RNG onto that and sprinkle in some higher chances on saying things that actually make sense. Almost everything in this game is trying so hard to convince you that it's layered and sophisticated, and you're just peeling away layer after layer until you reveal there's nothing there. Starfield is a game of boxes. You traverse through hundreds, thousands of boxes in your playthrough. In your ship in space, that's a box. Maybe there's nothing in the box. Maybe some meteors or some enemy ships. Maybe an old granny has invited you into her box to eat her sweet rolls.
I've got plenty. I hope you're hungry.
And as I say that, I think to myself, why did I say that? But at the same time, that's literally what happened. So, you want to go into another box, right? Load into this planet. No, you can't fly to it. You're in a box. You're in another box now, a virtually void box planet. Spend 2 to 4 minutes running to this point of interest. You made it. You're in an empty building. New box. You look around for a few minutes and find nothing. Lockpick these chests for meaningless loot. Leave that box back to the lifeless planet, then fast travel out of that box into your ship. Then fast travel out of that box into a lively city. Each lingering transition, each loading screen, groaning at you, asking you, why are you doing this? Odd. Nobody is talking to each other. They're simply walking aimlessly or standing meaninglessly. Yet they will stare at you through vacant eyes. Sometimes you may notice people's faces and bodies change if you take your eyes off them for even a second. That's odd, isn't it? They will walk by you and tell you about this interesting person on a planet far away that you didn't ask about. You are the only thing that matters in this world. Once in a while you may stumble upon two people naturally talking, but when you approach they begin to longingly stare at you, as if you're some unique, exotic animal. Huh. Maybe you're not in a box. Maybe you're in a cage. The focal point of the entire universe, eternally observed, never able to escape the confines without permission, always needing to go through the customs process before being allowed into yet another cage. There's a very distinct lack of immersion in everything, from exploration to just how NPCs function. See, in previous games, the majority of NPCs were named. Add on top of that the addition of Radiant AI with Oblivion, but that was removed after Fallout 4. I suppose I can understand why. The scale of these games can't afford to incorporate it. The cities are so large that, to make them feel lived in, you need an abundance of nameless NPCs. But that doesn't feel alive. They provide nothing to the world if all they do is roam without purpose. I get it, but I don't have to like it. Especially when it didn't have to be this way. Which brings us to the fact that Bethesda is out of touch. The creation engine is guilty of many faults with the game, but it cannot account for a loss of passion and vision, and it cannot account for always thinking bigger is better, gradually sacrificing absolutely everything for a sense of shallow yet gargantuan size. You've created a brand new detailed shipbuilder with specification and expertise requirements, while allowing for the creativity of players to make many unique types of spaceships. Yet they can't go anywhere with these creations. They spend hours creating the perfect ship to be restricted to a cage. And at what cost? Games cost more to make than they used to, so they're on a balanced beam of resources. In-depth shipbuilder and outpost builder to be restricted to a cage. A bare-bones melee system, or a much wider variety of guns. 1,000 plus procedurally generated barren planets, but 1,000 plus planets, or a richly detailed and densely packed handcrafted solar system. Taking all of this into account, what exactly is the intention of Starfield? What experience is this whole package trying to provide? I think we can glean some answers from that with how they went about the main story. And so we begin our journey, on our second day working as a miner on the moon of Vectera. We're introduced to Lynn and Hella. Lynn informs you that mining is just like any other job, and that all you need to do is go steady, go safe, and get home with a pocket full of credits.
Now I work in the Stardock, except with more cave-ins, lasers, and accidental dismemberment.
For future reference, Hella is like the comedic relief, except there's never any relief, and you'll never see him again after this intro, because when given a mission to find him later in the game, I completely skipped it, and I'm very happy with my decision.
That's why I keep him around. Good pep talks.
Yeah, and
we make our way through the caves, and Lynn gives me a cutter and puts me to work. She then radios in later on to tell me they're ready to continue. Hella picks up some weird and dangerous readings on the mining scanner thingy, and Lynn sends the rookie, me, to go and check it out. So I head up there, and this orchestra-esque soundscape begins to play, growing louder and louder the closer I get, until I touch the magical artifact protruding from these floating rocks, and it shows me the magic of space. Then we pass out, and then I'm given an iPad to create my character. I called her Luna, She's a Ronin snake worshipper with parents that are, in fact, alive. So we take a look around, see if we can find any goodies. I steal a guy's sandwich.
Hey, that was my sandwich!
Then we head outside to meet the client. Outside we meet Barrett, the person who set up this job, and then space pirates attack. It appears that the enemy AI is terrible, a good sign from Bethesda that even after 6 years since the previous Fallout game, that war indeed never changes. We deal with the pirates, and Barrett starts telling me because I touched a rock and saw space magic, my job here is done and I need to go to Constellation. Then Barrett and Lynn start bickering about what to do with me. They agree that I can go if Barrett stays here, for some reason. Then Lynn starts speaking to me as if I'm a child, tells me I've been fired, and that I'm a space explorer now, whether I like it or not.
Don't you get it? You don't have a job here anymore. You're with those explorers now.
Get out of here! Can't you see we don't want you anymore? Why can't you go back where you came from? Leave us alone!
Then Barrett gives me a watch, a robot handler named Vasco, and a whole spaceship. I tried asking him why he couldn't just go instead, since he's experiencing the same things as me, but he just told me I'm the main character and that would be against the rules. I tried to take out my frustrations on them, but it seemed they were invincible. So I took out my anger on the injured scattered around the area.
What's wrong with you?
Then headed onto the ship with Vasco. We get attacked by space pirates for tutorial purposes, and Vasco informs me that the chances of the pirate chasing us is too high, because they want to steal my new ship, even though we can just travel at light speed to any necessary location. So we need to go and land the ship they want to steal on the planet where the pirate captain is, for some reason. So we kill the pirate captain, and then head to New Atlantis to reach this constellation. Upon entering the building, we are introduced to some of the other members. Sarah Morgan, Matteo, Noel, and Walter. Sarah begins interrogating me about why I'm here in place of Barrett.
Would you care to tell us what happened to our friend? Why you're here and he isn't?
This is just typical. Barrett hands over our ship and our robot to some random employee of that discount mining outfit he uses.
Walter.
And if we hadn't insisted on installing those emergency protocols, I guarantee you this rock breaker here would be halfway to Neon.
See, Mr. Walter here makes a great point. In Oblivion, you are an inmate in the Imperial prison, being berated by a dark elf until Emperor Patrick Stewart shows up to tell you he's been dreaming about you.
Let me see your face. You are the one from my dreams.
And that you're destined for great things. Then gives you the Amulet of Kings to bring to his son.
I can go no further. You alone must stand against the Prince of Destruction and his mortal servants. He must not have the Amulet of Kings. Take the amulet, give it to Joffrey. He alone knows where to find my last son. Find him and close shut the jaws of Oblivion.
Then he dies.
Strange.
You exit the prison from the sewers and you're free to do whatever you want. In Fallout 3, you're born into a vault, stuff happens, your father Liam Neeson leaves the vault, then you escape the vault in search of your father.
What I do have are a very particular set of skills. Skills that make me a nightmare for people like you. I will look for you. I will find you.
Or, don't do that. You're free to explore. New Vegas. Matthew Perry shoots you in the head and then your quest for revenge begins. Or not. There's a very distinct pattern here. Skyrim, prisoner again, sentenced to death, dragon attack, escape, you are the foretold, legendary Dragonborn. Nope. Fallout 4. You and your wife and child must escape to the vaults before the bombs go off. And while encased in the cryostasis pods, some guy kills your wife and steals your